and 16. Mahomes rolling out. Looking, firing, intercepted. Picked up by Cooper DeJean. Gets a block. DeJean is in. Touchdown for the second time. The Vince Lombardi Trophy is headed to Philadelphia. Eagles fly in Super Bowl 59.
Okay, I know you guys have been waiting for this one.
Yeah.
With Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. T-Bone, I got a bunch of tweets last night. BK, you even going to show up tomorrow? Yeah, I'm here. Get your jokes off. 314-399-9646. That's the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. T-Bone, I didn't see it. I didn't see it coming.
You and me both.
I thought there was a chance that the Chiefs would lose because the Eagles are really good, right? They've got a great running game. Jalen Hurts has been playing well in the postseason. The defense is outstanding. I knew the Chiefs' deficiencies. We talked about this on Friday. What could go wrong? Well, they don't have a very good offensive line. They've got a guard playing tackle, and the guard that's in there now in his place is not good at all. Frank Caliendo, it's his cousin, I think. He was impersonating a left guard. So I knew there was a chance that this thing could go poorly for the Chiefs. Never in my wildest imagination did I think that the Chiefs would get blown out the way that they did last night. And that game would be remembered. Like, if you're a young person right now, I want you to know, games like that used to be the norm in the Super Bowl. When I was growing up, you had the Giants versus the Ravens. That thing was never close. You had Raiders versus Buccaneers, where it genuinely looked like the Bucs defense knew what the Raiders were going to be doing offensively before the Raiders knew what they were doing offensively. And then you had another one like Broncos versus Seahawks was one of those games as well. The final score doesn't indicate this, but anybody that watched the game knows, hey, Broncos versus Panthers, closer than what you saw last night final score-wise, but was never actually a close game as well. These games happen, and generally speaking, it's because one of the teams defensively, and specifically on the defensive line, they run all over the opposing team's offense. That's what happened last night, man. Chiefs got their ass kicked. I'm not here to be the one that has some kind of excuse. No, man. They got absolutely destroyed. So if you want to get your jokes off today, feel free to do so on the text line. They have earned that. If you want to do so on the YouTube chat as well, youtube.com/101ESPNSTL. I said it with my chest all year that nobody else is eligible to win the Super Bowl.
No.
I was wrong. Not only wrong, I was loud wrong. And I apologize for that. Chiefs got absolutely crushed last night. T-Bone, what was your biggest takeaway from it?
I mean, mine was how much I feel like I undervalued that Eagles defense, right? I mean, you mentioned it. We knew they had a good defense, but I never saw in the range of outcomes their defensive line just bullying the Chiefs, because I thought for sure, okay, Mahomes is going to get his, and he kind of did as the game went along in garbage time. But I thought, okay, that Eagles defense, they're going to have to be great, because I don't know if the Eagles are going to be able to win this football game if Barkley gets shut down. And Barkley got shut down. Like, the Chiefs defense did what it needed to do. It stopped the run, and it said Jalen Hurts beat us. But Jalen Hurts didn't even really have to beat them, because that defensive line was so great. It was the formula for what I've mentioned every time when it comes to how do you beat Patrick Mahomes. You just get in his grill. You get to him all the time, and that's what Tampa Bay did.
Great quarterback ever.
Yeah, that's what Tampa Bay did when they beat him a couple years ago, and that's what the Eagles did last night. The fact that they didn't have to blitz anybody, and they could just drop back in coverage and say, okay, Mahomes, hold the football, and our defensive line's just going to go to town.
It's supposed to be a math problem. Chiefs have 5 to block 4, which means you win.
It should be easy. Yeah, you get a free double team on somebody. Yeah. And hell, you can even keep your running back in and try and block and go 6-on-4. It didn't matter yesterday. I was blown away by how effective that defensive line was, because, again, I had questions about the offensive line for the Kansas City Chiefs, but I've seen them get away with that, right? We saw them get away with it against Buffalo. We've seen them get away with it against, Houston, whose defense was pretty good in that game.
Right. Yeah.
That was just pure dominance from the Philadelphia Eagles. And once they started doing that, you could tell it threw Mahomes off his game. I mean, we saw it. It was a blowout at this point. But that fourth down play where they run the quick little out to DeAndre Hopkins, wide open. And I thought Brady had maybe his best analysis of the night. But he said, hey, he got rushed, right? He in his mind has the internal clock of I've got to go quickly, doesn't grip the football right, misses a throw that 99 out of 100 times Mahomes hits.
No doubt. And it was ugly from the very beginning. I felt like, okay, so the first few drives, Chiefs just looked off. They didn't look right. But we've seen this in the Super Bowl. The Chiefs have looked off in every Super Bowl. They get down by 10 in literally every Super Bowl in which they have played. And that's typically when the game begins, right? I mean, last year they were down by 10 in the fourth quarter and they came back to win. So I wasn't panicked at that point in time. The moment where I realized, they're not coming back from this. Like this game's pretty much over, was the pick six. That was the moment where it felt like, okay, Mahomes is spooked because on that drive, first down, sack. Second down, sack. It's 3rd and 16 now. He tries to force a ball in there on a play that just isn't there. Cooper DeJean, full kudos, by the way. I'm not taking anything away from the Eagles. They were unbelievable last night. It was going up against an ace pitcher when they have their best stuff, and they strike out 17. Like, that's what happened last night against the Chiefs. So they deserve all of the credit. I'm not taking away anything here. But Mahomes throws a bad pass, the type of pass that he just never throws, and it gets taken back for 6. Now you're down 17-0, and I'm like, okay, well, this is going to get pretty ugly. But then I thought there was another potential opening because the Eagles, their next possession, didn't really do anything with it. So the Chiefs get the ball back. There's less than 2 minutes to go in the first half, and at this point, the offense has been atrocious. You're down 17-0. But this is typically the spot that Mahomes comes through. And you've got an opportunity. The Chiefs are a very good situational football team. 2-minute drills, 4-minute drives, middle six, like all of this stuff. They're typically very good in these circumstances. First play, minute 50 to go. Patrick Mahomes throws an interception. And that's when I said, okay, this is it. Like, we're not even at halftime. That's game. Game over right there. There was no chance that the Chiefs were coming back from that, and it became very clear they have no answers. I had a few buddies text me at halftime and say, what do you do? Like, what are the adjustments to be made here?
And your response was wave the white flag?
Yeah, my response was literally like, I mean, you could put DJ Humphries out there, the tackle that they signed midseason. It's not going to make any difference. No. They have no chance. They had zero answers for what the Eagles were bringing defensively. Philadelphia was the story of the game to me. The story of the game last night was that is one of the most dominant performances I can remember by any defense in a playoff game. And to do that, and I know people are going to get their jokes off today about how the Chiefs are overrated, they were never that good, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. If you believe that, you're actually taking away from what the Eagles did last night. The Chiefs' offense has been pretty damn good this postseason, and they've done it against really good opponents. What the Eagles did last night, I mean, it's like Bob Gibson in a World Series. Like, that was unbelievable what they did on that side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they held them to they didn't get across midfield to the third quarter. They had like 30 yards of total offense for about a half. Like, that's insane. Like, against Patrick Mahomes, look, we can have all the questions we want about that offensive line and how much they can protect him, and that wide receiver room's not great with Rashee Rice out. We can all say that. But the fact that even Patrick Mahomes still couldn't do anything against that Eagles defense, and we've seen him get by with a misfit of toys, right? He won a Super Bowl last year with what I thought was a misfit of toys. And they did nothing. I'm with you. Look, I had some alarm bells going off with the Kansas City Chiefs all season long, going, they can't get away with this all year long with these one-score games. Hey, man, I'll tip my cap because you're right. That was a dominant performance from the Philadelphia Eagles defense. And I agree with you. I knew it was over when they forced that second pick right before half. Because I thought, look, when did the Rams have success against the Philadelphia Eagles in that game, especially when it was snowing? It was tempo, right? Going fast. We're going to wear them down. We're going to keep that defensive line on the field. They're going to get tired. And that's when the Rams had success. So when they got that ball back inside 2 minutes, and I thought, okay, they can do the double dip. This is where it's going to be great. You're right, Mahomes, the Chiefs, they're great at situational football. They can play with tempo now. This is how they get back in. They do that double dip, touchdown, get the ball back, boom, now we got a football game. And he didn't even have time to drop back before his left tackle was in his lap, and he throws a pick. That's when I knew it was over, and that's when I knew we were watching something special from that Philadelphia Eagles defense.
All right, so for me, my conscious memory of watching football basically goes back to like 98. That's pretty much the first time that I really remember watching football in any meaningful way. And since then, the games that I can remember in the Super Bowl, and Tom Brady talked about this beforehand, he's totally right. The Super Bowl games just mean more. They matter more because you can remember them in a way that we very rarely do with the other games that take place over an individual postseason. It's why, like, Brady lost by 20 points in the AFC Championship game against the Baltimore Ravens in 2013, I think it was. People don't remember that or care about it because it was the AFC Championship game. But everybody will bring up, hey, Brady against Eli, that Super Bowl, or Brady against the Eagles, that Super Bowl. Those are the ones that people really remember, are the losses in the big game. So for me, the dominant performances that I can remember that were similar to this, and I'm not even sure that any of these are necessarily on the same level because of what the opposition was in this one, being the Chiefs. Giants against the Ravens back in 2001, but that Giants offense wasn't this. Yeah. The Ravens defense was remembered as one of the greatest ever, but the Giants, yeah. The 2003 Super Bowl between the Raiders and the Bucks, the Raiders offense was really, really good. It was Rich Gannon at the quarterback position. He was like MVP caliber at that point in his career, but he's not Patrick Mahomes. The 2014 Broncos versus the Seahawks is probably the closest thing that I can recall to what we witnessed last night. Because at that point, Peyton was still great. They're going up against this defense that is like on the rise. People knew about the Legion of Boom, but this was like their real coming out party. Like, if you do this against Peyton.
And that was the best offense in the league that year. Like, that's where it's a little different from this one is the Chiefs offense was good, but it wasn't like as good as that Broncos offense.
That's the closest thing that I can compare it to, though. Yeah. That's the closest comp that I have in my memory bank over the last 20 plus years. It's just so rare, dude, to see a quarterback of this caliber get that kind of embarrassed in the Super Bowl. Yeah. It doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't. And I think this is probably the second most surprising one, like in my lifetime, because like I don't remember the Gannon one that you referenced. I don't remember 2001. I was 1 year old. I was still wearing diapers. But like that Broncos one was the one that was surprising to me, and I still think that's the most surprising, just because it was. Hey, it's the classic fairy tale of what wins. Defense wins championships or an elite offense. And that was number one versus number one. And the number one defense just kicked the living crap out of Peyton Manning. This one's probably up there as the second most surprising result, because even though I said all week, hey, I thought the Eagles had the better overall roster. I know we talked about this on Friday.
I thought it was overstated, and I was completely wrong about that.
I remember you raising that question on Friday. But I still felt like there was a chance Mahomes keeps it close, right? Like, you can talk about how great the Eagles are and how well constructed that roster is, but it's Patrick bleeping Mahomes, right? He's going to keep the game close at least. Like, even if they lose, they're going to have a fighter's chance because they have the current GOAT in Patrick Mahomes. And the reality was he had no chance. Like, he was seeing ghosts all night long. You saw how frustrated he was. They eliminated Travis Kelce, his go-to target, when he needed it on third down. You're right when you say it. They had legitimately no answers for the Philadelphia Eagles, and that's what makes it surprising. And by the way, not only a great quarterback at Patrick Mahomes, one of the best head coaches in NFL history in Andy Reid. And he had no answers. And Steve Spagnuolo, they never had an answer. And the defense did its part for as best as it could in the situations they got put in. But, man, that offense, the fact that they had no answers, credit to Vic Fangio and the Philadelphia Eagles, because that was a hell of a performance on the defensive side of the ball.
No doubt about it. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this as we go along today. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You guys can check us out on YouTube as well at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. Coming up on the other side, was this the start of something for the Eagles, or was this the peak right here? We just saw the best that it's going to be, and then it kind of, it settles in as them being a really good team moving forward. Or they've been to 2 Super Bowls in 3 years. They just won one. They've got a very good defense. And now I think people are starting to buy into what Jalen Hurts is as a quarterback. Was this the potential start of something for them? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN. So we've talked a lot about the Chiefs side of things. We kind of opened with that and then what the Eagles did last night. I do want to talk about what this means for Philadelphia. They've now been to 2 of the last 3 Super Bowls. They got their Super Bowl win last night. Nick Sirianni, and I've been one of these people. Everybody doubts him as a head coach, and then he goes on to win the Super Bowl. Jalen Hurts, everybody doubts him as a real, top 10 caliber quarterback. He played his ass off in the first Super Bowl, gave them every opportunity to win that game, and then last night, he didn't have to do a ton. He made 3 or 4 throws, though, in that game that separated them from the Chiefs in a way that was really meaningful. That throw to Devontae Smith was unbelievable, and it was a great play by Devontae Smith as well. You can't ask for a much better coverage. Just sometimes there's no defense for a perfect throw. So Hurts did what he needed to do last night, and the Chiefs basically shut down Saquon Barkley. If you told me before that game, hey, Saquon at the end of the day in this one is going to finish with 25 carries for 57 yards. What happens? Well, the Chiefs probably win. It's not what happened. They end up getting their ass kicked. So the reason why I bring all of that up, T-Bone, is because I do think there's a real conversation to be had here about what this means for Philadelphia. They've got a very young team on the defensive side of the ball. They're returning basically their entire roster. They are losing their offensive coordinator, but Vic Fangio's coming back, and he's one of the best DCs in the NFL. Quarterback feels like he should be riding high, having a lot of confidence. The first time that he's actually had the confidence of his team and his fan base, the entire time that he's been in Philadelphia. Was this the peak? Was this we will remember this era of Eagles football for that game? Or do they have a potential run in them? Because I remember last time around when it was the Eagles went to the Super Bowl and they win it with Nick Foles. It's man, Carson Wentz is coming back. This team's going to have a really sustained period of success here. Look at all the talent on that side of the ball, and it never really happened that way. Is this going to be different? Are they going to be able to sustain it this time around?
So I feel like it's got a chance to be sustainable, but the one thing that I just can't wrap my head around, and it's why I lean more towards the side of I think this was their peak, is I don't think you're going to get that kind of Saquon Barkley performance again. And that's not to say Barkley's not just going to fall off a cliff and be a bad player. That was one of the best single-season rushing seasons we've seen in NFL history from Saquon Barkley. I mean, they outrushed their own passing game throughout the year. And I just don't think that's a sustainable model moving forward. And I think to ask Saquon Barkley to do a repeat performance of this season next year, I don't think you can get away with that. And I think there's going to be teams that will adjust to try and stop the run from the Philadelphia Eagles. I think there's a chance that Barkley, we've seen this, running backs, there's a reason teams don't pay them. It's because they just get beat up and they lose their explosiveness as their career goes on as they get older. So my expectation is he's going to lose a step. And as great as Jalen Hurts was, and I'll give him all his flowers today. I mean, he put himself in a new conversation of quarterback, and we'll talk about that later on. I still don't know if he's a guy that can do what Patrick Mahomes does, right? And win with a cast of misfit toys. So I think we saw the peak for the Philadelphia Eagles. I think as much as we talked about, hey, this is the year the Lions have to win the Super Bowl, or hey, this is the year that Baltimore's got to do it with Lamar Jackson. I think the Eagles were kind of in that conversation, and we quietly weren't talking about it because I just don't think you can continue to have a team that's built around a running game that is their main priority on offense and have continued success. Now, I don't know if there's a team that I can really pinpoint that had this kind of roster because, like I mentioned in The Office, right? Remember that Titans team that was the 1 seed? They weren't this. They had Ryan Tannehill at quarterback, and they were built around Derrick Henry. We never believed in them. But we believed in this roster all season long, saying they were one of the best rosters in football. I just worry about them if they're going to continue to say, hey, Saquon's the guy that drives us for us to be a successful organization.
They remind me so much of the Seahawks early in their run. It feels so similar to me in terms of Seahawks 2013-14 get to back-to-back Super Bowls. Now, this was 2 and 3 years instead of the back-to-back for the Eagles, and the Seahawks won their first one instead of it taking the second time around. But there's a lot of similarities there, and the Seahawks were built around defense and a really great running game, and then Russell Wilson making the big throws, especially over the top when they needed it. The thing that's different, though, is that Super Bowl loss changed everything for them. And it was because that was the moment where there was a divide that was created inside of the locker room between Russell Wilson and the defense, and Russell Wilson and the coaching staff. It felt like Russ wanted to be more than he was, and they never really seemed to get over that. They were still a good team, consistent 10 wins every year. Defense was really solid. Pete Carroll got them what they needed to, but they never got back to that high level of potential again. This feels a little bit different to me. This feels like something that is a bit more sustainable. It almost felt as though the potential moment where things could go off the rails was last year, and it didn't for the Eagles. The Eagles had that moment. Their Super Bowl moment where Russell Wilson throws the interception to Malcolm Butler was last season, the disastrous second half where they just completely melt down. And it could have been this year. Okay, well, that was it.
Yeah, and reports in the offseason, Sirianni and Hurts didn't talk for the final, 10 weeks, which
literally
is insane.
didn't have conversations. Yeah. They have to overhaul their coaching staff, like all these different things. And then what's the result? They go to the Super Bowl and win it. So I almost feel like they got over their moment in a way that the Seahawks never really did. And the reason I bring that up is because, man, the Seahawks could have had a sustained run. The NFC allows for that because there aren't the dominant quarterback-coach combinations the way that there are in the AFC. I mean, if I asked you right now, who is the best quarterback in the NFC right now? I think we all probably say Jaden Daniels.
Yeah.
We've seen 1 year. But if I said second best quarterback in the NFC right now, maybe Matt Stafford?
I was going to say, it might be Stafford and McVay. Hurts now, I mean, he's now up in that conversation after yesterday.
You can at least have the argument that Jalen Hurts is the second best quarterback in the NFC. And I think you have a pretty strong argument if you want to say the Eagles have the best defense going into next season in the NFC. Jalen Carter, you think probably takes that next step. That defensive backfield just gets better after being a really young unit this year. It feels to me similar to what the Chiefs were after that first Super Bowl in 2022 when they traded Tyreek Hill and they overhauled the defense with a ton of great young talent. And it set them up for really what this last 3-year run has been. That's when you add Karlaftis, you add McDuffie. They added a ton to that side of the ball. It just allowed for a lot more flexibility. That's where the Eagles are at right now. And they don't have Patrick Mahomes. They don't have Andy Reid. They've got to replace their offensive coordinator, and I'm not truly sure what Nick Sirianni does because he doesn't call plays. He doesn't seem to have great relationships at times with some of the players.
I don't think he hired his own coordinators this year based on how reporting was laying it out, right? It sounded like almost the GM and ownership got involved.
But they have a chance to go on a run here. I don't know how long it'll be because it's really hard to build around defense. That's the difficult part is like, the Seahawks showed you this. The Chiefs have shown this now. They're about to get expensive on that side of the ball, and that's where things get tough, is continuing to develop and have from within these young, cheap, cost-controlled players. But for at least the next year or two, yeah, I think the Eagles appear to be the team to beat in the NFC. I don't see anybody else, and I will include the Lions in this regard. Losing both coordinators, getting more expensive. I think the Eagles going into next season should be considered the team to beat in the NFC.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to look at the NFC and say, who the better team is. Maybe it's Washington if they have a good offseason because they've got the rookie quarterback, so they'll be able to really go out and push themselves if they've got enough cap space and they can add another wide receiver to help out that offense and they can improve the defense a little bit as well. There's just something about the way that the Eagles offense is built that does have me a little concerned. And it is just the fact that it's relying on a running back, right? Saquon Barkley being that guy again next year. What would this Eagles team one that wins a Super Bowl if Barkley is 80% of that or 70% of that this year? And that's where my question lies.
So it's a fair question. I think what we saw in the Super Bowl is they might have been able to. And Nick Sirianni said this after the game. Jalen Hurts said this after the game. A.J. Brown said this after the game. Don't mistake haven't done something for can't do something. And the Eagles this season did not throw a lot to win. That didn't necessarily mean they could not throw to win. And I think we saw that in the Super Bowl. The Chiefs' defensive game plan was very clear. You are not going to beat us with Saquon Barkley. And they didn't. And they had to play left-handed in that game last night. The Eagles did. And it worked. Turns out they're ambidextrous, and it doesn't matter. You can play either way when you have Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown out there. And this upcoming draft, maybe they add in a better slot receiver, or they go out and get a Cooper Kupp, something like that on a very cheap veteran deal. The Eagles, it's entirely possible they're a more well-rounded team next year than they were this season. Injuries are a huge part of this. We've seen this with other teams where the Lions this year were supposed to be incredibly versatile and had that defensive talent. Yeah. And they just got hurt. So it takes a lot of luck, a lot of good fortune to be able to get to this place once again, but the Eagles are more than capable of doing so. Last thing that I wanted to get to before we talk a little bit about the Cardinals and the news coming out of camp today. Was this a scarlet letter for Mahomes? Because you can get away with having one of these performances. What they did against the Bucs in that Super Bowl, Mahomes played unbelievably well in that game. He just had no help around him. The receivers weren't all that great, and more importantly, the offensive line was getting destroyed.
Yeah.
Like, left and right. They had no chance, and Mahomes was making these crazy passes where he's like parallel to the field, like just some of the wildest throws you'll ever see. But they got blown out, and it was a horrible game by the Chiefs, and everybody remembers it. And then it happened again. This is 2 times in a 5-year stretch where you get to the Super Bowl and you get embarrassed. You don't see that. Like the reference points that I mentioned earlier today, it's the Raiders with Rich Gannon. It's the Giants with like Kerry Collins as their starting quarterback, who I'm not sure that you even remember who that is.
I thought you made that up.
It's the Broncos in 2014 when they had the number 1 defense, but at that point in time, it was like the end of the Peyton Manning era, basically.
Yeah.
What does this do for the way that people view Patrick Mahomes? Because I think it's silly to say, like, oh, not a top 5 quarterback anymore. He's never going to get back. I think that stuff's silly, but I do think it matters. To me, it reminds me of like what LeBron did against the Mavericks in that first NBA Finals that he had with the Miami Heat. People still view LeBron James as an all-time great, but it kind of ended the comparisons between he and Michael Jordan, because Michael never had that.
Yeah.
I do wonder if this is going to end for a lot of people, right or wrong, I think this is the game that will now end any of those comps with he and Tom Brady, because Brady never had this in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think it's possible that ends up happening. Now, I think it's if he ends up bouncing back from this and he avoids more Super Bowl losses like this or games like this and gets to 6, 7, 8 Super Bowl championships, however many it is that he ends up finishing with, I think then maybe that conversation restarts. But I think for now, yeah, I feel like it is tabled of being the GOAT with Tom Brady, because you're right, Brady never had this kind of loss. Now, it is also a little hard to swallow that Brady never got the three-peat as well. And now Mahomes didn't either, but he was fighting for it. He had the chance to get to that spot. But I do think it does hinder the way that you look at him, because when you think of Tom Brady, sure, now he had some bad losses, like you mentioned to me in the office when he got destroyed in the wild card round by the Baltimore Ravens, and Ray Rice ran all over him the year Flacco got them to the Super Bowl. But that's the wild card, right? That's a game that's easily forgotten. I had no recollection of that.
Right.
This was on the biggest stage, in the biggest moment, and you're right, it's happened twice now. So I do think it is a little bit of that factor into this. When you start having that GOAT conversation, you have to point this out and go, hey, Brady never had this moment in the Super Bowl. Mahomes did, and not only once, he's had it twice now. And I think it tables that conversation for the time being until we get another couple years into the Patrick Mahomes era here and we see what he does moving forward.
After that loss that the Chiefs had against the Bengals in 2021, I guess it would have been, there was an overhaul of the roster. And it was like, okay, well, they're going to become a new version of the Chiefs. I don't know if it'll work, but they're going to become a new version of the Kansas City Chiefs. And this high-flying, like, relying exclusively on the deep passing game version of the Chiefs is gone. That's a way of yesteryear, because Tyreek Hill was then traded. And they overhauled it, and what they ended up doing was they kind of became a more well-rounded roster, right? They did this efficiency over everything offense where Mahomes does his best Alex Smith plus impersonation. He's getting rid of the ball quickly. It's Juju across the middle, all of these different things. And then the defensive side of the ball improved in a dramatic way. I think you're now getting to the next version. I think it's like 3-year increments where the Chiefs can have one thing for a 3-year stretch, and then they have to change. And I think what you saw last night was this was the end of this era of the Chiefs. I don't know what the next one's going to look like, but it's going to be different. It might not include Travis Kelce. It might not include Justin Reed or Trey Smith or Nick Bolton. It's going to be different. And I'm really curious to see what that ends up looking like. They are the new Patriots in that regard, which is like the Patriots had to change in every 3 to 4 year stretch. That's where the Chiefs are right now, and it's time for their next pivot. The last one worked really well. It doesn't always go that well. Sometimes it ends up being a bad thing that you have to pivot, and then it goes in the other direction, and maybe it becomes Josh Allen's time. That's on the table. And last night was their opportunity for a three-peat, and instead, it really became an opportunity for the Eagles to show just how great of a team they were. All right, with Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. In 15 minutes, we'll get into questions and answers. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. Coming up next, Nolan Arenado is at Cardinals spring training a week ahead of report date. Talk about that here on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Eagles dominate the Chiefs in Super Bowl 59, 40-22 the final score as the Eagles take down Kansas City and prevent the Chiefs from three-peating. For the Blues, over the weekend, they defeated the Chicago Blackhawks in a 10-round shootout. On Saturday, the win puts the Blues at 55 points on the season, 8 back of the Vancouver Canucks, who have that final wild card spot going into the Four Nations break. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
All right, I was legitimately surprised when I woke up earlier today. I flip on TMA and I hear them talking to Jeff Jones of the Belleville News-Democrat, who had a report earlier today because he got a bagel sandwich out there in Jupiter. Was over at the complex early, and he saw Nolan Arenado walking into Roger Dean Stadium alongside Tanner Hendrickson, who's in today for Alex Ferrario and Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex going to be off for this week. It's Four Nations face-off, some well-deserved time off for our guy Alex. So when I heard that, T-Bone, I was like, man, it feels a little early for Arenado to be there, and he's still in trade conversations. He doesn't know if he's going to be a St. Louis Cardinal or not. So I was pretty surprised by it. Jeff Jones even said, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm a 13 in terms of my level of surprise that Arenado is already here, but hey, good for him, I suppose. T-Bone, you had an interesting thought about this. When you heard Arenado was at camp already on February 10th, when he doesn't have to be here until mid next week, what was your reaction?
I had two reactions. One is I'm glad he's there early, and two is I'm actually not surprised he's there early. I mean, a little bit, but that's just because, like, last year he came in, like, the day they reported and then called out the young guys, and that just pissed us all off, and I remember ripping on him for that. I'm glad he's there early, and I don't give a rat's you-know-what that he's in trade conversations. Look, right now, he needs to plan that he's a St. Louis Cardinal, and he's coming off one of his worst years as a big leaguer. It's third worst in terms of OPS plus based on the way you look at it, and that's even including 2020 in his rookie campaign. He should be there early. He should be putting in the work, because if he's going to be back as a St. Louis Cardinal, it's kind of twofold for reasons why. Actually, it's onefold. Baseball said we don't value your current contract. And if you want to go to a contender, which we know Nolan Arenado wants to do, and he turned down a trade to the Houston Astros, dude, you got to start playing like the guy that's being paid $60 million over the next 3 years. So I'm glad that he's there early. I'm glad that he's putting in the work. And I think my favorite part about him being there early is he's not talking to the media right now, right? That's the worst case scenario for him, is to potentially speak to the media and say something that we end up having to talk about the next day.
And he would.
Yeah, he
Nolan
would.
Does.
His best case scenario is, hey, get there, put your head down, put the work in, and avoid speaking to the media as long as possible, because the moment he does that, he's going to be asked about the trade speculation. Sure. He's going to be asked about declining a trade to the Houston Astros. He's going to be asked about playing in a retool that he clearly doesn't want to be a part of, even though everybody keeps saying, oh, well, he's fine with being here. No, he's not. Because he's the one guy with the no trade clause that's trying to be traded. Sonny Gray's still here. Willis Contreras is still here. Miles Mikolas, he probably wasn't going anywhere anyways, but he's still here. I'm glad he's there early. I think it sets a good tone for him and the Cardinals.
I agree. I'm glad he's there early. I'm just surprised by it, and I do wonder what this means, if anything. They're clearly still trying to get something done. Mo has made that abundantly clear, and I think that it was interesting. Jeff Jones mentioned, hey, if he's going to go to the Red Sox, I believe they have their complex somewhere down in Florida as well, so it's not like he would have to go far. I think at some point within the next week, we talked about this a lot last week as well, at some point in the next week, teams are going to want to have their rosters put into place. They don't like this stuff that drags into the middle of spring training. We've seen this go poorly at times here locally with the Cardinals. It's on the pitching side of things, but you had Greg Holland sign towards the end of spring training, and he just never looked right. Last year was Jordan Montgomery, who came in late into spring, and he never looked right the entire year. Just throws off a player's comfortability. So I'm glad he's there. I do still think he gets dealt. If I had to put money on it today, and I've been pretty steadfast on this all along, I don't think Nolan Arenado is a Cardinal in 2025. I think he's probably going to be a Boston Red Sox, but even if it's not Boston, I think eventually something gets done. I just think we're still waiting on Alex Bregman, and I'm I'm baffled that he hasn't signed anywhere, man. Nobody's blinking. That seems pretty clear at this point.
And the thing I don't get with Bregman, you bring him up, what's his leverage?
No,
right?
There isn't anything.
Like he's
Unless he's willing to wait for somebody to potentially get hurt or for people to report.
Sure, but these teams that are interested in him,
I don't know.
The reason they're interested is because they don't have somebody that they like at third base.
Yeah, I don't get it.
And I don't know if there's a team that has that kind of money. And if I'm a team looking at Bregman, I'm going, dude, you've got to sign somewhere. Training camp starts. He has no leverage. And you mentioned Arenado. If I'm being honest, I'm skeptical he's getting dealt because I thought it would be done with Boston now, right? When we saw the reports, and look, maybe I'm reading too much into the smoke that's up in the air, but when there's smoke, there's fire. And when reports came out last week that said, hey, Boston Red Sox, St. Louis Cardinals, they've kind of rekindled conversations. And then the next day a report came out, Bregman's still seeking a 6-7 year deal. Well, my immediate thought was, okay, so Boston's clearly ready to pivot. But why hasn't it happened yet? Are they still waiting on Bregman? That's just where my skepticism still lies. Are they the team that's still holding out hope that Bregman wants that short-term deal? Because I think there is a 6-year deal offer out there for Bregman. It's just a matter if he wants to take it, and I think it's in Detroit. As we get closer and as the Cardinals report, pitchers and catchers report on Wednesday, I think he's going to be here.
Arenado?
Yeah, I think he's going to be a Cardinal for the 2025 season. And I think he's going to be a Cardinal for the entire 2025 season. I know Claib's talked about today on TMA, like, hey, if he is here, best case scenario is he has a great year. Man, he's got so much money on his contract. Even then, he's not a trade deadline guy.
Deadline. This is an off-season thing.
And that's the cool thing we talk about. I know it's a different sport, but Braden Chen, he feels like a hard contract to move at a trade deadline. That's how I feel about Arenado. So I think he's a Cardinal in 2025.
Yeah, I still think this thing gets done. It's not an easy move to make, and there's a lot of complicating factors. The Red Sox still feel like the most seamless transition, and that's not easy because they're moving an all-star, all-world, all-everything third baseman to first if they make this kind of a move. And, they got to talk to Rafael Devers to make sure that that's something that will be okay with Devers. And they have Casas, who's a good player as well. There's just a lot of moving parts. It still doesn't make sense to me why Boston wants to do this, but that's not for me to care about. My concern is what happens on the St. Louis side of things, and I still truly believe that something will end up getting done. All right, in 15 minutes, we got to talk about Jalen Hurts. He's putting himself into a new conversation when it comes to where he ranks among the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He's played in 2 Super Bowls, and he balled out in both of them. In fact, you can make a pretty strong argument. He was the better quarterback head-to-head against Patrick Mahomes in both of the 2 Super Bowls in which he has played. What does that mean? How do we view Jalen Hurts at this point in his career? We'll talk about that in 15 minutes. Questions and answers is coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN.
Follow-up to the segment that we just did. Jeff Jones tweeting out just a moment ago, I have to eat this and apologize. I have since been told that Nolan Arenado is not in Florida. In fact, he is still at home in Southern California. I do not know who I saw walking into the clubhouse this morning, but it is quite apparent to me that I was mistaken. He continues, I am, to put it mildly, absolutely mortified, and I apologize for being incorrect. No excuse for it. I owe an apology to Tim, Martin, Doug, Jackson, and everybody else involved with TMA. That can't happen on my end. It's flat out bad, end quote. All right, so Nolan Arenado, not at Cardinal spring training.
Yeah, well, Nolan, would you get out to Florida for crying out loud? Coming off a terrible year.
Everything we just said in the last segment,
we're not
take
podcasting
that back.
Cut it from the podcast, Grant. Don't put it in there.
That didn't happen. Our thoughts on Nolan Arenado, if he were to report early to Cardinal spring training, you can refer back to the 11:30 segment if you'd like to hear that. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. So yeah, that's not ideal, but there you go. Nolan Arenado, not at Cardinal spring training. All right, from the 314, questions and answers here on BK and Ferrario. Did you guys see Elliot Friedman linked Shin to Vegas earlier today? However, he said that the price is, quote, astronomical for him. I did listen to Elliot Friedman's podcast earlier today, the 32 Thoughts podcast. He does an excellent job on there. To say this was a report is a little overstating things. It was speculation. Basically, it was, hey, there's a big name on the market. Vegas always gets big names. Ipso facto, he plays the way that they want to. They have a history trading together. Vegas is always interested in players like this. Vegas makes sense for Braden Shin. So it was more of a connecting of the dots than it was a Braden Shin to the Vegas Golden Knights kind of a thing. That being said, Braden Shin makes a lot of sense for the Vegas Golden Knights. He's not wrong. And it does feel very Vegas-y. And I'm sure if Braden Shin is going to be dealt at the deadline, somebody like Vegas or Toronto is where he's going to go. He's not going to a maybe kind of a team. If he's going to get moved and he's going to waive that no trade clause, it's going to be for a team that he sees as a clear and definitive contender, not just for 2025, but for the next 3 years on his contract. So yeah, Vegas could make sense to me. I did find the most interesting part of that report was that it continues to be said by national reporters, the price is really high for Braden Shin. And I think it was him who also said, hey, there's a lot of teams out there that just don't have what the Blues are looking for, which means they're not looking for draft picks, which is good. I think they shouldn't be looking for draft picks in return for Braden Shin. But the ask for Shin at a deadline, I think, is going to be tough for them to be able to get. My guess is they want a young player similar to a Broberg or a Holloway, a young guy that's entered the mix and looks to have real potential, but hasn't necessarily emerged as a top 6 forward or something on another contending team. A lot of those guys are important pieces to be able to win a cup, and if you're going to trade them away and get Braden Shin, are you really taking a big step forward? I don't know. That's where it gets difficult to me.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I continue to be surprised that it's a high price that the Blues are talking about, because I get what they would want a young player in return, like you mentioned, like a Broberg or a Holloway kind of type. Like every team wants that. I'm surprised that they would A, get that, and B, the Blues wouldn't just look at this and say, man, not having a 33-year-old center at $6.5 million on our roster for the next 3 years, we should just take what we can get if teams are actually interested in him.
I think they value his leadership. I think that's what this is. I think they value having Braden Shin in the room. And whether you agree with that or not, that is up to you to decide. I personally, I see the value in it, but I'm kind of more on your end, T-Bone, and I've seen this team not value that leadership over the years. So it is interesting to me that this is the one time where they do really see the value. Grant, what do you make of this?
I think the biggest thing, I don't think it would be hard to move Braden Shin if the Blues were classic sellers, but they're not sellers right now.
Totally.
If they're going to trade Braden Shin, what they're going to want in return is a player that's going to positively impact them immediately. We're talking next season. So I don't think any team that's competing, trying to, make noise in the playoffs, going out and getting a Braden Shin, is going to also send out a player that is going to be impactful for the Blues when they have them and they're trying to compete. So I think it's almost one of those things where if the Blues are wanting to still, take in draft picks, take in prospects, I don't think it would be that difficult at all to trade Braden Shin. But the problem is when the Blues are wanting to bring in a player that's going to be competitive on their roster right now, why would a team want to do that when they're trying to do the same thing?
Right.
It just doesn't make sense for either side at this point.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers from the 314. Guys, do you have any worries about Mizzou basketball after the past week? I don't, and I think they will be fine, but do you find any warts that could end up being a problem for them in March. So I think if I told you, hey, Mizzou's about to play 4 teams that are ranked in the top 16 nationally in the next 2 weeks, how do you feel if they go 2-2 in that stretch? I think most fans would say, oh, and the 2 losses are by a combined 7 points. Most fans, I think, would say, pretty damn impressive. 2-2 against top 16 teams, including a win against the top 15 on the road by 27 points. And the 2 games that you lost were on the road at Tennessee by 4 and at home on a last second shot against Texas A&M when your top 2 players were combined 6 for 22 from the field. That's a pretty damn good 2 weeks. That being said, I understand if you're a little disappointed by the last 2 games. I get that, but no, I don't have any concerns about them. Every time I watch them, I'll say it again. I think their ceiling goes up a little bit. Over the weekend, that is a terrible matchup for Mizzou. Texas A&M is super big, super physical inside. They do the things that should give this team issues. And Mizzou was blow for blow with them after going down 12-0 in the early going. So no, didn't open up any wounds for me.
Yeah, I don't have any concerns. I think the thing that has really showcased itself is, a lot of times when a team's best players, like you mentioned, Caleb Grill and his teammate going 6 for whatever it was, 16 or whatever, typically when the best teams have their best scorers shut down, game's over, right? A&M wins that game walking away. The nice thing about this Mizzou team is if you do shut those guys down, they've got the defense that can counter that, right? They can play a game that's like the Tennessee one where it's 85-81, or they can play a game where it's 67-64. And you couldn't say that about that team that we keep referencing from 2 years ago with Kobe Brown. Hey, you shut down Kobe Brown, he won the basketball game because Mizzou wasn't going to get stops. And that's where I think they're different. And that's why I don't have any worries is they can play that game where, hey, Caleb Grill gets hot. They can outscore you if they need to. They can also get into a defensive slugfest if necessary.
All right, last thing here. We'll do this really quickly from the 314. Do you guys think that Travis Kelce will retire after that game? Do you think that was the end of the road? I don't think so. I think he's going to come back and play one more year. I wouldn't blame him if he did, though. I think it became very clear by the end of the season, he just isn't the same guy anymore. And Kelce has so many other things that he wants to get involved with. He's got a girlfriend who's like the biggest pop star in the world. You might have heard of her. Her name is Taylor Swift. He wants to get into movies. He's got a podcast that the rights of it sold for $100 million. Like, the dude's doing just fine. He doesn't need the money. It hurts to play football, and he doesn't move the same way that he once did. So I would totally understand if he decided to hang it up. I don't think he will. I think he wants one more opportunity to go after a Super Bowl. If they had won yesterday after watching the game and kind of seeing, I think he probably would have retired. But I don't think he wants to go out like that. I know that there's very rarely the perfect opportunity to walk away. I don't think yesterday was the game that he wants to walk away from it with.
Yeah, I think he still plays 1, maybe 2 more years. And it just goes back to his comments from, I think it was Super Bowl Media Day, where he said, yeah, I still plan on playing. Typically, when you get guys that are ready to retire, you already start to hear it, right?
Like Donald stuff the week of the Super Bowl, remember?
Yeah, like there was reports of Donald was like, hey, this could be his final run. And at the time, I was like, no, he's still like the best defensive tackle in the league. But the moment it starts to creep into the player's mind of, man, is it time for me to hang it up? That's when you really have to question if they're going to retire. You saw, like Stafford. Stafford's been bringing it up now for a year or two, which tells me, hey, the Rams have like another year, maybe 2 of this before he actually laces it up. Kelce, I think he plays. Like, I have no doubts in my mind he'll be a Chief next year.
Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll play a game of in or out. You guys give us a scenario. We'll tell you if we are in or out here on BK and Ferrario. But next, Jalen Hurts, after that performance last night, I think you got to give him the credit that he deserves. Where does he rank now among the best quarterbacks in the league? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK for my friends over at Circa Sports in the state of Illinois. I am betting with them because when I win the most money possible. And I got to be honest, I didn't win a whole lot of money last night because I had the Chiefs side of things. But if you put together a parlay of the over and the Eagle side of things, you won more with the Circa Sports app than if you had bet on FanDuel, for example. The same thing is true if you want to get your baseball futures in right now. Cardinals pitchers and catchers report later on this week, and I am going to be putting some bets down on some baseball teams to win the World Series. I've got the Braves at 12-1. I like their odds there. 9-1 over on FanDuel, but 12-1 with Circa, and the Phillies are also 12-1 over on the Circa Sports app. 11-1 odds if you made that exact same bet over on FanDuel. It's about how much you win when you win, and you're going to win more when you bet with Circa Sports in the state of Illinois. So download the app today. What are you waiting for? Put those futures bets in for baseball as well. If you want to get some bets in on the Four Nations Face-Off, you can do all of that over on the Circa Sports app in the state of Illinois. If you or someone you know may have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234. A little bit of news to pass along. This just coming in on Twitter. Tiger Woods said he planned to tee it up this week, but he's just not ready. Did my best to prepare, knowing it's what my mom would have wanted, but I'm still processing her loss. Thanks to everybody who reached out. I hope to be at Torrey Pines later in the week and appreciate the continued kindness since my mom's passing. So Tiger Woods will not be at Torrey Pines for the tournament this weekend. Alongside T-Bone and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. So T-Bone, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a guy that I feel like is getting undersold for his performance yesterday, because the defense was the big story, right? The Chiefs had no chance against that Eagles defensive line, and I also think the secondary is kind of getting undersold in this. Part of what made the defensive line great yesterday is that the secondary just had such great coverage on those quick passes that the Chiefs had been utilizing. So the receivers aren't getting open. The pass rush has an extra beat to be able to get there, and then it throws Mahomes off. Boom, end of story. But Jalen Hurts was also great. And this is now back-to-back Super Bowls in which Jalen Hurts has been fantastic. Finishes the game averaging about 10 yards per attempt, has another 70 on the ground, including a big one, and then has the touchdown on the tush push as well. So he has 3 touchdowns overall in that game. Just a really good performance by Jalen Hurts. I feel like coming into the season, The biggest questions about the Eagles were twofold. One, their coach. Two, their quarterback. Not a great place to be as a team, considering those are the two most important things typically to success. Now they win the Super Bowl, and Jalen Hurts was great in it. Does it change for you where you put him in the hierarchy as the NFL quarterbacks, T-Bone? Because we had this conversation before the show, and it feels like you're ready to slot him in even a little higher than what I'm prepared to do.
Well, I'm ready to put him into the top 10 of quarterbacks in the NFL, and I thought
say it with your chest. You were going further than that earlier today.
I don't think I was. I would point at Grant as the one going further than I was.
Fair.
But I believe now he's top 10. I'd put him somewhere in like that 7 to 10 range, I think is where he belongs after this. And going into the Super Bowl, look, I was screaming on these radio waves all last week, like, this is Jared Goff when he was with the LA Rams. Like, this is the moment where the Eagles look at this and say, man, do we need to trade our quarterback? And, hey, I'll tip my cap. Yesterday showed you, to me, he can be a top 10 caliber quarterback. Now, for some reason, I feel like we don't see that in the regular season, but that goes back to our conversation that we had of is this sustainable for the Eagles? Is it a Hurts can't do it in the regular season, or is it a, hey, Hurts doesn't have to because the 2 years that they've gotten to the Super Bowl, they had a hell of a running game. But, I mean, I can't deny what he did yesterday. I know he only threw for 220 yards, but he was only attempted 22 times, but he was efficient. 17 to 22. He was reading the defense, and it wasn't like he was just dinking and dunking his way down the field. He hit some bombs down the field on big plays, like we mentioned the Devontae Smith touchdown pass. That's a perfect throw. And the thing that makes him different is he can utilize his legs. 11 carries for 72 yards yesterday. He was willing to bail out of the pocket. If the Chiefs got around and failed to contain, he would just take off up the middle and pick up the necessary yards when needed. So I think he moved himself into being a top 10 quarterback. And the thing that makes him great, and you mentioned his performance in the Super Bowl last year, or 2 years ago, excuse me, he looks like he's a guy that shows up for big games. He doesn't wither under the pressure like we've talked about with Lamar Jackson. Of Lamar all of a sudden looks like a different player when he gets to the playoffs. Jalen Hurts has taken his game to another level when it gets to postseason time. So I think that win yesterday, getting the Super Bowl MVP, playing as well as he did against Patrick Mahomes, and I think you said it right, has outplayed Mahomes in their 2 Super Bowls. I think he's a top 10 quarterback in the NFL now, and I can't deny that of him.
I can't put him ahead of Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Lamar, Jaden Daniels. Those 5 for me, I'm just not even willing to have the conversation. If you told me tomorrow I can have one of those guys or Jalen Hurts, I'm taking those guys over Jalen Hurts every single time.
In a playoff game.
No, just in general. Like, I could start my team with them. I could have them in a playoff game. You tell me I can go out there and play 7-on-7, flag football. We could play dodgeball, whatever. I'm taking those 5 guys over Jalen Hurts.
See, because
now, weightlifting competition, I'll take Hurts.
I'll take Hurts.
Push competition, I'll take Hurts. But if we're playing football, I want one of those 5 guys over Jalen Hurts.
In the regular season, I would agree, but if you're talking playoffs, I would not take Lamar Jackson over Jalen Hurts.
If you told me I have the same supporting cast, so I'm flipping them, right? Jalen Hurts is going to now be on the on the Ravens, and Lamar Jackson is now going to be on the Eagles. I don't think a whole lot changes, and in fact, I think the Eagles are a little better now. I think Lamar's just a better player than Jalen Hurts. I think he does a lot of the same things that Jalen Hurts does well, and I think he does them a little better. The one thing you don't have necessarily with Lamar is the tush push, but I think they find a way to be really good in short yardage situations in a different way. But for me, it's definitive in my mind. I would still go Lamar.
And I'm curious.
And I've been critical at times of Lamar.
I'm curious if this is why you asked. Would you take Jalen Hurts over Lamar for a playoff run?
I would.
And is it because of the sacks? Because I'll say this: the one thing that Jalen Hurts now around that with that offensive line, I don't know if Lamar takes sacks, but
Agreed.
The one negative for Lamar has always been, hey, dude, he kills drives because he takes critical sacks. And if you made that argument, I'm open to listening to it. I would still pick Hurts, or I would still pick Lamar myself, but I'm open-minded to hearing the argument for Jalen Hurts now.
I think my argument would be, what has Lamar done in the playoffs? It's really that simple for me. Like, Jalen Hurts has gone on runs. He's outperformed Patrick Mahomes really in 2 Super Bowls now. Like, why would you take Lamar, who, I mean, how many even AFC championship games has he been to?
1 now. Yeah, just the 1.
Like, how are you going to take a player that's been to the AFC championship 1 time over a player that just beat Patrick? I understand that.
I think sometimes we overstate. It's what made me so frustrated last week about the conversation about the Chiefs. Like, people were like, "Oh, it's the great team versus the great quarterback," and I think that's just underselling how much you need. Like, I've seen the Chiefs have a really bad team around Patrick Mahomes, and it ends poorly. That was the Super Bowl against the Bucs. That was the game against the Bengals. And yesterday felt that way, but I credit that more. Like, the Bucs team that the Chiefs played in the Super Bowl was pretty good. They were not the same quality as what we saw yesterday. The Eagles were amazing, dude. That team is really freaking good, and I undersold their talent. The Chiefs have a good roster, though. And I think the Ravens have a pretty good roster. I think it gets overstated sometimes. Like, they don't have the pass rush that the Eagles have. That doesn't exist in Baltimore. I think every year, for whatever reason, we overstate their talent on the defensive side of the ball. But anyways, we can step aside for that for a second. You've got him up in that spot. Like, you've got Jalen Hurts now in the conversation, top 4 in the NFL. I think that's a little high, but I understand the argument. And especially coming off of what we saw in this year's postseason, it's hard for me to like really push back, even though for me personally, I would not have him in that category. T-Bone for us, like, I think the conversation starts after 5 again. Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Lamar, Daniels, to me, would be the top 5 definitively. But then it gets really interesting, man. We say top 10, he's in that next category. Stroud, Stafford, Jordan Love, Herbert, Dak, Drake May. Like, you're getting into some of the young guys that haven't proven a ton at this point in time. I think Hurts is definitively in that category. And at this point, I think you have to probably put him at the top. And if we were starting a team like just for next year, if you wanted to take Stafford over Hurts, I could listen to it. I would take Hurts probably because of the age factor here. But that to me, like, I think you can make a pretty strong argument. He's 6. I think he fits right into that spot.
Yeah, I would probably take Stafford ahead of him slightly, but like it's hard to kind of argue that, and that could just be me and my fandom, right? Being the Rams fan, but yeah, I think he's in that conversation now. I think he's ahead of Dak Prescott. You know, I think he's ahead of Jared Goff, Jordan Love, and it's just because he's done it in the playoffs now, and that's the biggest thing for me.
I also think we understand how much he's done in the regular season. Like,
he's
last year, not this year, but last year, he was top 3 in the MVP voting. Like,
yeah,
he's pretty good.
I don't know why, but I feel like you don't see it as much in the regular season with him. And I think it's just because he's been overshadowed by their running game.
Correct.
And
they ran the ball 58% of the time this year.
Yeah, and they were awesome at it. Like, I think he's now in that top 7. I think 7th is where I would put him right now. I would still put Stafford slightly ahead of him.
We've all got him somewhere in that 4 to 7 range. So he's in that 2nd to 3rd tier, depending on how you want to kind of break them down in the NFL. That's amazing, given where Jalen Hurts was. Like, think about his story for a second. This is what I was thinking about yesterday, because about midway through the second quarter, my mind had just like changed from, oh my God, the Chiefs are going to win a 3-peat, to this is kind of an amazing feat for what the Eagles are doing here. And that speaks to what we do and the lack of emotional investment that you have compared to what it was at a certain point in time in our lives. But that's a different conversation for a different day. Jalen Hurts was benched at halftime in his college football national championship game. Think about that for a second.
For Tua.
Like 6 years ago, Jalen Hurts was at halftime of his game against Georgia, and his coach, one of the best, maybe the best college football coach in the history of the game, decided Tua Tagovailoa gives us a better chance to win. And he was right. Tua won that game. But Jalen Hurts then handles it as well as any player I've ever seen. Like, in the post-game interviews, he was not only graceful, but like almost embraced it as, hey, this is the next opportunity is going to come for me. I'm really happy for Tua. And it was in that moment that I was like, I don't know what that guy's going to do in life. I don't know if he's going to be an NFL quarterback, but he's going to be successful in whatever it is because of the way that he handled that situation. I would have been furious. Imagine yourself at 21 years old after having like a really good season, getting benched for a freshman in the national championship game. I'd be furious. But he handled it with grace, and then the next year he goes to Oklahoma and finishes 2nd in the Heisman voting. Then he's drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles, who at the time thought they had their quarterback. They end up trading him. Hurts takes over, has a pretty good first season overall, but there's questions on if this guy, if it's going to work at the NFL level or not. Then he takes his team to the Super Bowl, and then the next year has this fall from grace, and in the second half, they just have this massive meltdown, and he's a big part of it. He has this terrible relationship with his head coach. Then he gets his team back to the Super Bowl and wins the MVP. That's an amazing ride. So just the Jalen Hurts story to me is what really came through last night of like, whether you think he's the 4th best quarterback in the league or the 7th or somewhere in between. That's an unbelievable feat for a guy that 7 years ago now was benched at halftime of his national championship game. Just an unbelievable story, man. Really cool, and I couldn't be happier for the dude. He's put together one hell of a career. I said the other day, reminds me a lot of Russell Wilson. I think he's now taking that next step to Jalen Hurts has a chance to put together a Hall of Fame resume. Think about that. If he continues on this path, he's probably going to go down as a Hall of Famer. That sounds crazy right now, but I think it's true.
Yeah, I was just saying, I was
been
all in on...
Been to multiple Super Bowls, won one, including a Super Bowl MVP, finished in the top 3 of the MVP voting during the regular season a couple of years ago as well. He's got a chance to put together a Hall of Fame resume. That is what he's on pace to do right now at this point in his career. We'll see if he gets there, but he's got a chance to be able to do that.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I was in on everything you're just saying.
What did you disagree with?
I don't know if I see him pushing towards the Hall of Fame. And I get what you're saying of if he keeps this pace up.
Ben Roethlisberger's a Hall of Famer, then Jalen Hurts is on that path.
I
He's
won't
a
go
chance
that
to be modern day Big Ben.
I won't.
Over the last 3 years, here's his regular season records: 14-1, 11-6, 12-3. Been to 2 Super Bowls, won one, was the MVP. And during the regular season, in that first run, finished second in AP voting for MVP during the regular season.
Yeah,
that's a resume.
It's a resume. I wouldn't bet right now he becomes a Hall of Famer. I wouldn't. I still believe we might still be seeing just the peak of Jalen Hurts now.
Totally.
I don't know. He's going to need another Super Bowl win, Super Bowl MVP, and probably needs to have another MVP caliber season.
I don't agree on that second conversation. Part. I think he's got to get to another Super Bowl. That's the Big Ben resume. If you're just really good for another decade and you go to another Super Bowl, you're Big Ben. That's the resume. And Ben Roethlisberger's a Hall of Famer, man.
Yeah, I can't deny that, but call me skeptical. If you told me today, you can lay down money, Jalen Hurts will be an MVP.
The other thing, and this
I don't know if I'm getting plus odds or not, but I'd say no.
I agree with that. The other thing about this, somebody on the text line brought it up. It's kind of the Eli resume as well. Even if he's just
that's what I was thinking in my head.
Because he beat Mahomes.
Yeah.
He played really well against Mahomes in the first time, but the defense let him down. And in the second game, he beat Mahomes head-to-head and won the MVP.
But Eli never, if I'm not mistaken, did he ever finish top 5 in MVP? He never got MVP votes, right?
He's got a chance to have a better resume than Eli Manning.
Yeah, he probably already has one.
I think he's going to go to the Hall of Fame, man. I know that sounds crazy. We're 6 years in. I think that's what was established last night. Jalen Hurts probably a future Hall of Famer, whether we like it or not.
I hope not. And that's not me rooting against Jalen Hurts. I just want to be clear. Man. I don't think that's a Hall of Fame resume.
Somebody said all you did was name team stats. Regular season MVP second. Super Bowl MVP won it. Those are not team stats. Those are individual.
MVP can only go to a quarterback.
I'm just making Grant's over here, just everything you're saying. That's why I've got him for.
Well, even going back to the Super Bowl that he lost, if he would have played poorly in that Super Bowl, then it's okay, this was a one-off.
He had an argument to be the MVP of that Super Bowl, even though he lost.
People were saying that he could have won the MVP as a loser because he played so well.
Great. All right, coming up in about 15 minutes or so, how much did that loss and really the way that it happened change the way that we view this 7-year run for the Kansas City Chiefs? Talk about that a little bit. Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for In or Out here on BK and Ferrario. Hey, it's BK for my friends at Victory Men's Health, and it is time to unlock your inner champion. The place to do so is with Victory Men's Health. They have a ton of great things that they can do for you. For everybody, unlocking your inner champion looks a little bit different. Maybe you're somebody that's trying to get rid of some of that unwanted weight gain that you had over the holiday season. You decided, you know what, this is going to be my New Year's resolution, and it's not going the way that you had planned. Sometimes you just hit that plateau. They could potentially help you break through at Victory Men's Health. So ask them about that by going to their website today at victorymenshealth.com. When you get there, top right corner of the tab, it says book now. Super easy process. Put in your name, email, phone number. Tell them BK with 101 ESPN sent you, and tell them how they can unlock your inner champion today. Like I said, that's a little different for everybody. For some men, especially around my age, it could be some low testosterone issues that are starting to creep into your life. Do you have that same energy that you used to? Are you getting the same amount out of your workouts as you once did? Could be signs of low testosterone. They could check that for you at Victory Men's Health. Super easy process. Book your appointment today at Victory Men's Health at victorymenshealth.com. Is the Air Comfort Service text line for in or out. You guys give us a scenario. We will tell you if we are in or out here on BK and Ferrario. Let's start out with this. T-Bone. In or out, both Missouri and Illinois will make it to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament this year.
You asked me that question because I've been down on my Illini.
I did.
I know how.
Because you know how I feel about Mizzou. I think Mizzou's getting to the Sweet 16. How do you feel about your Illini? Will they be able to hold up their end of the
Mizzou doesn't run into a 15 seed, they'll be good. Okay. I'll say in. To me, Mizzou, I agree with everything that you say. Like I think they can go on a Final Four run. I don't think they will. I think they'll probably lose in the Sweet 16 or Elite 8, but I think they can get there. So I'm in on them. I think Illinois got the talent for a Final Four run. I think it's just a matter of they've hit a freshman wall. Riley went through it. Yakuchonis just went through it. He had a bounce back game this past weekend. it's just a matter of can they figure out all their offensive issues right now and shooting the three-point shot. I'm going to believe in them, though. I'm going to believe they've got the talent to get past that first weekend and get into the Sweet 16. I think that's where their run will end, but I will say in. Both teams get there.
I think so, too. I think Illinois is going to end up being one of those teams that, like, the regular season's weird and wonky, and they have some losses on the resume that you're like, how did that happen? And some of them are, like, bad losses to the point where they don't just lose. They kind of look ugly in them. They're still one of the best teams in America. And if they end up 4 or 5 seed, they should be able to get to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. So I think they're a team that could actually peak once we get to March.
Yeah, I worry a little bit about, and when I mentioned like they just got to figure their things out offensively, what I mean is they got to quit falling for the three-point shot's open. Guys, they want you to shoot three-point shot because you suck at it.
That's the thing. At this point in the season, we now have enough evidence. They're almost 25 games in. They're just not a good shooting team. So when you now... In the beginning of the season, some teams can trick themselves into believing they're a really good shooting team, and then it just doesn't show up for like 10 games. They're like, it's a slump. After 25 games, you now know we're not that team, and so they're 30th in America in three-point shot attempts relative to how many field goals they take.
300th in three-point field goal percentage.
Yeah, they're 295. Ugh. They can't shoot. Stop shooting so many threes. It now is upon you to figure out what the new answers are in your offense. So that's going to be their task, and I truly do believe that Brad Underwood will be able to do that. I think both teams end up getting to the Sweet 16. T-Bone, what do you got for us today?
Guys, in or out, Jalen Hurts will become the first quarterback in the NFC, out of the current group of them, to win multiple Super Bowls.
So the other guys in the NFC that have been to a Super Bowl, is it just Stafford? Am I missing somebody else?
No. Oh, Purdy.
Sure.
He's been. He hasn't won, but he's been.
And you're saying win multiple.
Win, not go to multiple, win multiple.
Yeah, I'll say in. I mean, it would require somebody else to go to and win multiple. or
Jerry
for Stafford to go
his
back
team was going to be there this year. You know, maybe they're on the cusp.
I don't think the Rams are quite ready for that kind of run, although they played the Eagles better than anybody else did.
I was gonna say, they were the one who tested them the most.
I do think it's worth noting that there was a huge snowstorm in that game, and
Yeah.
I kind of think it slowed down that pass rush and threw me off of the scent of the defense a little bit as well. But yeah, I'll say in. I think
slow down the Rams
they're
more.
the team to do it.
I'll go in on that too. They're so multifaceted on offense. I think they'll be right back there again next year. Wow. They'll be one of the teams.
3 out of 4 would be amazing.
I would say I would put money on them being back in the NFC Championship next year at the very least.
That's fair.
100% in on that. I guess I'll go in because I don't know who. You're right. You raise a question of who's the one that will get there and win multiple, because the Rams should really push since they're running out of time with Stafford, but I don't get the sense they're going to, so I don't think they're getting there.
The closest ones for me would be Jordan Love or Jaden Daniels. Those would be the 2 teams that I think are on the rise and the 2 quarterbacks that I think are capable of doing what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I think I agree. I would put Goff up there just because I'll trust the Lions, but he was terrible in their game in which they lost in the playoffs.
I'm thrown off by the coordinators, man. I just don't know what it's going to look like.
And that's fair. I get that 100%. If Caleb Williams reaches his ceiling, I think it's definitely possible the Bears could get there. But I got to see it first, right? So I think I'm in. And for me, it's almost more by default, which I hate to say that, because then I feel like I'm taking away from the greatness of what the Eagles have done and how great Jalen Hurts was. But I think I'm in.
Grant, what do you got for us today?
In or out, the Blues are underwhelming at the trade deadline and don't make a single impactful trade. And by the way, I'm talking Ryan Suter, Reddick Foxa, UFA's coming up. I wouldn't say that's a major trade.
Yeah, they'll get you
a round pick.
Yeah.
I think I'm probably in on this. The stuff that they're trying to do to really overhaul the roster, if you're going to trade a Justin Falk or Braden Shin, Pavel Buchnevich, these things, these big moves that people want to see them make, those are off-season moves, man. I could see them trying to make it work with Shin, because in that scenario, you're probably eating some salary, and the team that takes him on really believes they can go on a run, and then maybe even they flip him in the offseason. Maybe. That's the one that feels the most realistic to me, because there's only 3 years left as opposed to some of these other guys that we're talking about with 6+ years left on their contract.
Yeah.
But I don't think they end up getting that done. So I'm in. I think they end up being underwhelming at the deadline.
I agree. I think I'm in. Foxa, Suter, those kind of moves, they're not, like you said, they're not going to be anything that's big and sexy. And I think those guys will be dealt. I agree with BK. I think it's so hard to make these multi-year trades when they've got $6+ million on the books. Even Shen, like that one feels hard to me. And I honestly think the Blues are overvaluing Shen, right? Like they're talking about like, oh, the mammoth return. We've heard that now from Darren Dreger, Elliot Friedman, some of the best insiders in the NHL. I don't know who's paying that to the Blues. And I'm with BK. I don't fully get how the Blues get that kind of return. But I'm open-minded to them being able to do it. But I think all those kind of deals happen in the offseason because it is so hard to make those kind of trades. So I'm in.
The one thing I will say about the contracts and the cap hit and the contracts being difficult to move on from, the fact that the cap is going up as much as it is going to make it easier to make those trades. Like it's not going to be as steep.
I don't know if that helps this at the deadline as much. But in the offseason, sure, 100%.
And that's where I was going.
Noting. Shin could be like a $3 million player for somebody else. So for that
really,
team,
what 1.5 if you eat it for the deadline?
Yeah, because he'll only have 35% of the season remaining. So if it's a $3 million deal, he's like 1.5 for or 1.2 for whoever takes him on in terms of deadline space that you need to be able to carry that player. So yeah, it's not that bad.
Yeah, I think for what the Blues are trying to do, I agree with you guys that that's more of an off-season thing. I think it's going to be real tough to try to do that at the deadline.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for in or out. Let's get to this one from the 314. Guys, in or out, Dalibor Dvorsky will make his debut for the Blues after the Four Nation face-off.
I'm going to go out. I think it's going to be post-trade deadline. Like when they move Fox, if they move Shen, then I think he's definitely going to be up here and he can play second line center at that point. But I think it's going to be more after the deadline. I don't think they'll do right after Four Nations.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're going to stall that as much as they can and let him keep having success, build his confidence in the AHL. And I could see it after the deadline. I could see him not come up at all at the same time. Like, I really don't think they're trying to rush this. And unless they feel like it's going to benefit him, I think they might want to get him a little bit of a taste of it towards the end of the season. So post-trade deadline, I'll go in, but post-Four Nations, I'll go out.
All right, last one here. In or out, guys. Nolan Gorman has a better offensive season than Jordan Walker in 2025. I'm out on this. I think Jordan Walker is potentially going to have a really good season. I think we've seen what Gorman is. And I still don't know how Cardinals fans would feel about it. I think it's really valuable. I don't know how Cardinals fans would feel about it.
Yeah.
35 homers, 200 strikeouts. That's the type of player that he's going to be.
I dig the long ball, so I would love it. I'm going to go out, though. Look, I typically don't buy into post-game pressers or any kind of press conference, typically. I'm all in from what I heard from Jordan Walker at winter warm-up. That guy sounds like he's reinvested into hitting, and I think him and Brant Brown are going to work out well. So I think he has a better year than Gorman. I still think Gorman has a okay year, but I will say Walker has a breakout year, so I'm going to go out on this.
Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. In 15 minutes, we're going to dive into the junk drawer with some mean tweets. We'll explain that coming up here in just a little bit. But next, how much did that loss and really the way that they lost change our perspective on the Chiefs' 7-year run that they're in the midst of? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN.
Greg Francis here with a SportsCenter update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The Eagles are victorious in Super Bowl 59. They took down the Chiefs 40-22, preventing Kansas City from making history and three-peating. Jalen Hurts goes home with the MVP. He went 17 for 22 with 221 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, had 72 yards on the ground as well, and a tush-push touchdown. For the Blues over the weekend, they faced off against the Chicago Blackhawks here in St. Louis, beat them in a 10-round shootout 6-5, up to 55 points on the season now as they head in to the Four Nations break. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Football is all about dynasties. It's kind of like the NBA in that regard. When one ends, it seems like another tends to emerge. So you go back to the 49ers back in the late 80s, early 90s. They had a 7-year stretch in which they went to 6 NFC championship games, finished out with 3 Super Bowls, won all 3 of them. That's a dynasty right there. The Cowboys in the mid-90s went to 4 straight NFC championship games, went to 3 Super Bowls, won all 3 of them. So that was their dynasty of the 90s. And then you get into the 2000s, you've got the Patriots. They win 3 out of 4. But the run that I really remember the Patriots for was 2011 to 2018. They go to 8 straight AFC championship games. They end up in 5 Super Bowls and win 3 of those 5 opportunities. The Chiefs now are the next up, right? And I just went back to the 49ers. You can go back even further. You've got the Steelers in the 70s as well. You could continue going back all the way to the Packers if you really wanted to. But every decade basically has a team that ends up being the one to beat. The Chiefs now went to 7 straight AFC championship games, went to 5 Super Bowls, and won 3 of them. I'd say that's probably the biggest difference between the Chiefs and the Cowboys or 49ers. Those teams went to and won their Super Bowls. When they got there, they never lost. And that's kind of the equivalent of what the Michael conversation is compared to LeBron, right? LeBron always gets there, but hasn't always gone the best, right?
If he wins.
When Michael gets there, he wins it. I've always viewed this kind of as an Olympic. When you go to the Olympics, you can get gold, silver, or bronze. And like if you lose in the NFC championship game or the AFC championship game, that to me is like getting a bronze. We get to the Super Bowl and you lose, you get a silver. And, if you win it, you get the gold. I think people overly criticize Super Bowl losses and underrate the ability to get there. But whatever. Yesterday was one of those games where the criticism is warranted. They got there, but they got their ass kicked. And it's now the second time in the last 5 years where that's been the case. They got to the Super Bowl, played against the Bucs, got demolished in that game. Looked unprepared to play the football game because their offensive line could not block. And in that game yesterday, the exact same story happened. So, T-Bone, the thing that I wanted to bring up is, yes, this is clearly a dynasty. Anybody that argues otherwise is just trying to make somebody else mad. That's it. There's no denying that this was a dynasty and could potentially still be a dynasty. I don't think it's over necessarily. But how did yesterday alter the way that this 7-year stretch is going to be viewed, T-Bone?
I think you now have to almost put it behind what that Patriots dynasty was that you brought up, because the fact that they got demolished on the biggest stage. And I think you have to put that into perspective, because though Brady did lose, and he did lose to a backup quarterback, might I add, in Nick Foles, the game was close, and he never got destroyed like this on the big stage. Now, he did get beat in a wild card round and got destroyed in that, as we've already talked about. But I think this almost hinders the greatness of what that 7-year run was, because you got beat so bad 2 different times in the Super Bowl on the same formula, right? Of, hey, offensive line didn't block for Patrick Mahomes, and Mahomes couldn't get to his game. So I think it does alter the perspective as to how you look at it, and I think you almost have to put it behind what the New England Patriots were, because the Patriots never got their ass handed to them like this. And I think that's where the difference is it's the fact that when Mahomes loses, he loses bad, and he plays bad. You never had that from Brady. At least from my perspective, and I was younger during some of the Brady dynasty, so maybe I'm off, but it felt like when Brady lost, he didn't get destroyed. He got outplayed by somebody, even though he still played well. Like Nick Foles was awesome in that Super Bowl. He just outplayed Brady. It wasn't like Brady had a bad football game. Brady was good. Foles was just a hell of a lot better that game.
Are we talking about the Super Bowls or are we talking about overall for Brady's career? Because he did have games like this, not to this degree, though, and that's where the conversation becomes difficult. It's like he did have the game that we talked about earlier against the Baltimore Ravens, where it was that, hey, diddle, Ray Rice up the middle game. He had 83 yards on the first play from scrimmage from the Baltimore Ravens. They ended up being up, I think, 24-3 at halftime. Game was over. Now, the Ravens didn't continue adding up the points the way that the Eagles did yesterday, where they had that kill shot to Devontae Smith, and it's like, oh, okay, not only are you going to win this one, you're going to embarrass them while they're down. But they had that game. That was an embarrassing loss for Tom Brady. And they had a game against, I believe it was the Broncos, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they were down 23-3 early in the fourth quarter. And that's the kind of losses like that are quote unquote embarrassments for the Patriots. It's not overly embarrassing though. So I do think this affects the way that a lot of people view this 7-year run for the Chiefs, that they have these two scarlet letters on them. You do it once and it's like, okay, that was the outlier performance, weird game,
sure,
offensive line was hurt. Those games happen occasionally. That is the Ravens game for the Patriots dynasty. This one's hard to explain away. This one feels more like the LeBron versus the Mavericks in the NBA Finals, where I'm the biggest LeBron fan you'll ever meet. I can't explain that one away, man. He wilted. He wilted in the biggest possible moment. Now, he did end up learning from it, and he came back, and like the next few years, LeBron was on a war path where he ended up being the best. The peak of LeBron's powers were the next 2 seasons in Miami, where he shot like 65% or something from the court. It's just crazy what he did the next couple of years. Completely altered his game, decided I'm going to go play in the post now. Like, this is going to be something I never allow to happen ever again. So it affected who he became. And that's what I'm really curious about is, what does this game become for the Chiefs? What does it become for Patrick Mahomes? How does it change their team building process? Because they were all in on this three-peat, and now you lost. And you didn't just lose, you got embarrassed against a team that you had beat previously in the Super Bowl. So last time we saw this team lose in the playoffs, completely altered the course of their trajectory as a franchise. They traded Tyreek Hill, a move that I never thought they would make, and they invested on defense. And when they lost previously, they went all in on investing on the offensive line, traded a first-round pick to get a guy, ended up getting Creed Humphrey in the second round, got Trey Smith, completely overhauled that unit. When they lose in the playoffs, Brett Veach aggressively throws assets at whatever it was that made them lose that game. What's that mean now? What is the pivot for the Kansas City Chiefs? Do they get back to a deeper passing game? Do they go out and say, you know what? Screw this. We're going to get T. Higgins. Like, nobody thinks this is what we're going to do. We're going to go get T. Higgins and get that number one receiver that we've been lacking in recent seasons. Like, I'm really curious to see what the pivot looks like for them, because right now, totally alters the way that you view the 7-year run. If they come back and next year get back to the Super Bowl and then win it again, now it's a blip on the radar again. The way that the Bucs was viewed prior to this game.
Yeah, I think their pivot going forward is, I think they're going to have that. I mean, you just mentioned after they lost to the Bucs, they aggressively pursued that offensive line. They redid their offensive line that offseason. I think that's the route they go, because I think we agree their defense did its job last night. And I know that's hard to say when the defense in total gave up 33 points, but they got put in bad positions twice on one Patrick Mahomes turnovers and a failed fourth down conversion. I don't think the defense was necessarily the problem. Their offense can't block for Mahomes. Yeah. And they don't have really weapons that you're afraid of, right? Now, Rashee Rice, yes, when he comes back, he's a guy that you kind of fear. But to me, he's like a number 2 or a 1B at a minimum.
Sure.
Right, or best case scenario, I mean. Like, they just don't have wide receivers you fear. There is no Tyreek Hill, to your point, where it was, oh, my gosh, if that guy gets the football and has some space, good luck. It could be a 5-yard route that becomes a 60-yard touchdown.
It's twofold. One, the offensive line didn't hold up. Two, that was the biggest story of the game.
Yeah, 100%, yeah.
Two, their receivers couldn't get open, man. I like Xavier Worthy. He had 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, that doesn't happen. But but he wasn't getting open quick enough. He wasn't uncovering. And when that happens, now Patrick Mahomes has to hold on to the ball for that extra beat, which gives that pass rush just another, yes. So I don't know how they fix that, but it's something that they've got to look into. One other thing that I would add, as much as that was a bad game for Patrick Mahomes, I almost feel like the guy that should be taking it on the nose a little bit more today is Andy Reid. Andy has now had this happen twice where he had no answers for his offensive line falling apart. You've got to find something, dude. You've got to find some kind of an answer, whether that's schematically getting guys open quicker, finding easier ways to move the pocket. They didn't move the pocket once yesterday until the third quarter. How does that happen?
And they didn't. And the thing that surprised me is they never really played with tempo till the game was over, because that was the adjustment McVay made.
He had a terrible game plan.
Yeah.
Andy Reid with an extra week of time to prepare for a team, that's supposed to be where he's amazing. He was bad yesterday. He got flat out outcoached. He got pantsed yesterday against Vic Fangio. Not an image that I want to put in my mind right now.
Throw it in everybody's mind. Thanks.
Andy Reid got beat every bit as bad as his offensive line did.
Yeah.
He lost. He lost that game schematically as much as the offensive line lost that game physically. So I think he's the one that should really be taking it on the chin today. And it also doesn't look great for him. That happened twice. Twice he has had offensive line issues that he knew about going into the game and knew it was going to be a problem, and he had no ability to adjust.
Yeah.
That's tough to wear when you're considered to be one of the best offensive minds of this generation.
It reminded me of McVay's loss to Belichick in the Super Bowl.
Great comp.
Where going into it, it was McVay's offense was, hey, we're going to run the ball. It's going to lead to play action. And then that's what sets up Jared Goff. But he knew going into that Super Bowl, hey, Gurley doesn't have two knees right now. So we're running the ball with, I don't remember who the running back was at that point. It was some third string that they signed off of a practice squad that was running the ball for them. And Belichick had the game plan. We're going to stop the run, and when Goff drops back to pass, we're going to blitz, and he had no answers for it. And ever since then, I don't know if there's been a game I can look at and say McVay got outcoached. I think he got outcoached in the Philly game a little bit because he was just late to getting to tempo. But he eventually got there.
Yeah.
And that's where I never saw the adjustment from Andy Reid, because you're 100% right. I was watching that game going, okay, I thought they would go tempo of let's wear down the defensive line, keep them on the field. Well, they started doing that when it was 37-7. Well, at that point, it doesn't matter. You had to play with tempo no matter what. And they did move the offensive line, to your point, which I didn't even think about till you said that. But that's another way to avoid it is, hey, we got a problem with the offensive line. How about we just get Mahomes out of the pocket? Then we don't have to worry about it.
Great out of structure. It was just a really weird game plan, and then it took them way too long to be able to adjust. All right, he's T-Bone. That's Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex out this week. He'll be back in with us next week, getting some well-deserved vacation for the Four Nations face-off. By the way, we'll have basically every game of the Four Nations face-off right here on 101 ESPN. All of that begins on a Wednesday with Canada versus Sweden. Again, right here on 101 ESPN, we'll pregame coverage starting after the fast lane. In 10 minutes, we got to give you the updated AP rankings, including Mizzou dropping a pretty significant margin. We'll get into that in about 10 minutes or so. The Juncture is next here on BK and Ferrario.
Let's open it up. The junk drawer with BK and Ferrario.
Let's dive into the junk drawer. T-Bone texted us last night and said, all right, guys, I've got something for the junk drawer. It's going to be a mean tweets kind of idea. T-Bone, what do you have in mind? What's going on here?
So we were talking at a family dinner yesterday about AI, ChatGPT, all that kind of stuff. As one does, sure. Yeah, it happens. And we were talking about X. And X has an AI called Grok. I don't know how they do it. And anyways, it's built on the way that the AI was programmed was it just does everything from Twitter. And we were looking at it, and my uncle looked at his profile, and it had an option that said, roast me. So he said, all right, I'll click on it. I'll see what it is. We'll see if it's any good. And it was brutal. It was just completely, honestly brutal to where it scanned through his profile, made fun of his account, made fun of the username, made fun of his profile picture, which honestly was fair. And I thought to myself, boy, this would be great to do as mean tweets. So
I'll go ahead and get mine going.
Yeah, let's see what it says about BK's profile here.
What does it say about yours? I'll do yours first.
All right.
What's the Tanner Hendrickson roast me from Grok on Twitter say?
Grok says, all right, Tanner, you asked for it. You call yourself at T-Bone 101 ESPN on X. But let's be real. Your sports knowledge probably tops out at knowing how many points a touchdown is worth. You're the kind of guy who thinks wearing a jersey makes you an expert in the sport.
Damn.
You probably think roasting means heating up your leftover pizza in the microwave, which, by the way, you do on high for way too long because you've never mastered the art of reheating food without turning it into a hockey puck. Now, let's talk about that profile picture. And just for background, my profile picture is me at the NHL draft, just a selfie when we went to Nashville.
Okay.
If it's you, I'm guessing you thought Smizing was the name of a new energy drink. That smile screams, I just found out what Wi-Fi is. You've probably got one of those novelty mugs that says, I'm not arguing, I'm just explaining why I'm right, which I feel like was more BK than me, but okay. Because you think it's the ultimate comeback in any debate, even when you're clearly wrong. But hey, at least you've got the guts to ask for a roast, which means you're either incredibly self-aware or blissfully unaware. Here's to hoping it's the former, because the latter might just explain a lot about your life choices. Keep on keeping on, T-Bone.
All right. Well done. I feel seen from mine.
Yeah? You tweet a lot, so the AI program's got a lot to go through for your account.
All right, you ready?
Let's do it.
Here we go. All right, Brandon, let's dive in. You're the kind of sports fan who thinks analyzing a game is just about who got the most yards and who's the GOAT. You probably think the Super Bowl is just another Sunday to yell at the TV, yet you tweet like you've got the playbook in your back pocket. Your takes on football are as deep as the kiddie pool. In your predictions, let's just say they've aged like milk left out in the sun.
Oh, that's 100% true.
You celebrate players' stats like they're a personal achievement for you, but when your team loses, suddenly it's all about how the other team was lucky and physical.
Yep, that's you, yeah.
Let's not forget, your understanding of legacy seems to think that every game either comes down to, every game outcome either makes or breaks a player's entire career. Oh, and your radio show? I bet it's 3 hours of you saying, as I predicted, followed by, but who could have seen this coming? You've got the energy of a coach who's never actually played the game, critiquing from the sidelines with the confidence of someone who knows less than the fans in the stands. But hey, at least you're consistent in your sports fandom, consistently overanalyzing the obvious while missing the big picture. Keep tweeting, BK, because if there's one thing you've mastered, it's turning every game into a personal drama.
Wow. Yeah, I can see how you felt seen on that from the AI. That was kind of brutal.
I feel worse right now than I did yesterday during the game. My favorite team got its ass handed to it yesterday. This is worse. So much worse.
Oh, that was brutal.
All of it's right.
Yeah.
I can't argue any of that.
You want to hear mine?
That's all true. Let's hear it.
Okay, so I very rarely tweet, and when I do, it's Blues related. So
Sure.
Here we go. Grant, you're like the special teams of the Blues. You've got potential, but consistency, not so much. Your posts are full of hockey stats, but let's face it, you're more predictable than a power play under Jim Montgomery. You talk about players like they're your best friends, yet you're probably the guy at the rink who gets overly excited about a hat trick, even if it's not your team. But hey, at least your passion for hockey is as unyielding as Jordan Bennington's antics on the ice. Keep cheering, but maybe leave the analysis to the pros, eh? I don't know if it was roasting me or the
I
Bees.
was going to say, the AI really
crazy.
went for it with the Blues there. Man,
They nailed the three of us.
Yeah.
They nailed it. Yeah. I can't wait. We'll do this next week when Alex gets back in. I cannot wait to hear what Alex
Oh,
is.
I can't imagine what his probably does have a lot. It probably rips on him
100%.
like Grant there with the Blues.
All right, coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we'll dive into some more NFL quick hitters coming off of last night's game. Want to get to some of the other stuff, like ancillary pieces of the game, including Brady's analysis. Want to talk a little bit about that score bug. What the hell was that, Fox? And we also want to get at our thoughts on the halftime show as well. We'll get into all of that coming up in a little bit. Can You Beat the Blues is coming up at 1:30, so we'll have a few contestants to go up against Sonny today on that as well. But coming up next, Mizzou Hoops. They've got everything in front of them, but the AP poll, not particularly impressed with what they've done in the last week. We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN. T-Bone, the new college basketball top 25 poll has been released, and I'm not thrilled with it.
Yeah.
The Missouri Tigers come in at number 21. That is their new ranking in the poll. They dropped 6 spots after last week being at number 15 in this poll. Why? Because they lost to Tennessee by 4 on the road and at home on a last-second 3-point shot against Texas A&M. Their rankings combined were number 14 in the land. Tennessee was number 4. Texas A&M was number 10. This week in the poll, if you're looking at where they're at, Tennessee comes in at number 5. Texas A&M at number 8. So in other words, Mizzou lost to 2 number 2 seeds in the NCAA tournament and dropped 6 spots in the AP poll as a result. It feels a little wild to me. Doesn't seem like they should have dropped that many spots. Now, complaining about the AP poll, whatever. It doesn't ultimately matter. It's about where they're going to be ranked when it comes to the NCAA tournament. That's really all that matters. But this is crazy. Are people just looking at the win-loss record and that's it? And they don't really care about who you lose to? Because the SEC, yeah, you're going to lose some games. 4 of the last 4 teams that they played were ranked in the top 16 in the country. That's insane.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised they dropped. Or not a little. I am surprised they dropped this much, and because all those games were close, right? If they got killed
Totally.
by like A&M at home, okay, I could hear an argument dropping 6 spots. They lost by 3 on a last second 3-point shot, and they lost by 4 to Tennessee on the road. Yeah, I agree. AP rankings not the end all be all. I do find it a little ridiculous they fell 6 spots in the loaded SEC, and they lost to 2 of the higher ranked teams. They didn't lose to the unranked teams in the SEC, so a little bit cruel from the AP. Even crueler Illinois is out of it, if I'm being honest.
That also feels strange. Like Clemson, I guess they just gave them a massive bump because they got that huge win over the weekend. Creighton had a big win as well, so they're at the back end of the top 25. I would have Illinois in my top 25. Like, do you think Illinois or Michigan is a better team this year?
I would say Illinois. Now they haven't played like it lately, so that I can kind of get how they fell out. But I still think Illinois is a better basketball team than Michigan.
I think so too. But that's basically what they decided is like if you're going to have one of these 2 Big Ten teams, you're going to go with Michigan over Illinois for better or for worse.
Ridiculous.
I do think Mizzou is in a really interesting spot in their schedule. They just went through the gauntlet. Like they, over the course of a 7-game stretch, had Florida, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Texas A&M. All 5 of those teams at the time that Missouri played them were ranked in the top 16 in the country. That's insane. That's just an absurd stretch of games. They ended up going 3-2 against those 5 teams on their schedule. Pretty damn good, in my opinion. Now it starts to open up a little bit. The rest of the way, you only play up until the final game of the regular season 1 team that is ranked, and that's Alabama. That's going to be a really tough one. I'm hoping to go to that game next Wednesday. But Oklahoma, Georgia, Arkansas, South Carolina, Vandy, and then Oklahoma again, this one on the road. That's 6 games where you should win 5 of them. Probably.
Yeah.
And so regardless of how you feel, and I think it's ridiculous, about where Missouri is ranked right now, they should win probably 5 or 6 of their next 7 games finishing out the year. And that'll put them in range to potentially have a 4 seed, most likely, in the NCAA tournament. They're in the right league. They've got the right resume. Now you just have to start taking care of business. This was the tough part of your schedule. They ended up going 2-2 in it. I'm pretty good with that. They were really close in the 2 games that they lost. Missouri should be able to get a top 4 seed, and then if you get that, you just got to play to your seed to get to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, and looking back on their schedule, if I told you, hey, they've got 6 games against top 25 teams, and 4 of those 6 are on the road, and they go 3-3, I mean, that's a huge win for Mizzou with 2 top 15 wins on that resume. So they play like this. I agree. They should take care of business for the most part the rest of the way. Not only are you going to be a potential top 4 seed in the tournament, but you're also going to get that double bye in the conference tournament. Finish to where you're going to be able to get that double bye, don't have to play as many days, and then continue to add to that resume potentially in the SEC tournament and get that top 4 seed. And like you say, play to your seed and you're in the Sweet 16. You should end up with a favorable matchup in the first round as well.
Somebody on the text line said, BK, what did you want them to do? You didn't think that they were going to end up dropping? Well, Michigan is now ranked ahead of Missouri. They're at number 20. Mizzou is at number 21. Mizzou dropped 6 spots in the rankings. Michigan in the past week, a team that, again, went up 4 spots in the rankings, up to number 20, beat Oregon and Indiana. They beat Oregon by 4 at home. They beat Indiana on the road by 3. Indiana just announced prior to that game that they were going to be firing their coach at the end of this regular season. and that's the team that you're now going to put up in front of Missouri, it just doesn't make sense to me. Michigan earlier this year lost to Oklahoma, who's one of the worst teams in the SEC. They don't have a ton of resume-building wins. Meanwhile, Missouri, if you look at their schedule, they've got one of the better resumes in the country with the wins that they have now. They lost really close to Illinois. They beat Kansas in that game. They beat Ole Miss, who is also ranked ahead of them at this point in time. The rankings just don't make a whole lot of sense. They beat Kansas, who is also ranked ahead of them. Mizzou should probably be 16 or 17 in these rankings right now. That's probably where I would have them, either behind Kentucky or Wisconsin, depending on your perspective of those two teams respectively.
I'd agree with that. I don't get these rankings either. I mean, even looking at Michigan's schedule, they don't really have top 25 wins.
Their resume is not particularly impressive. They've got a bunch of wins, but the resume just isn't that impressive.
Yeah, and some of these, at UCLA, in theory, that's a big win. UCLA's not ranked anymore. They're
because their schedule is the opposite of Missouri's.
Yeah,
Missouri's schedule was front loaded with SEC top 25 opponents. Here's what remains on Michigan's schedule: Purdue, Michigan State, Illinois, Maryland, Michigan State. They've got a bunch of their tough games coming up, and they lost the most recent time that they played against Purdue, one of the best teams in the country, by 27 points.
Yeah,
I have a really tough time understanding what the explanation is there, and the truth is I don't think there is one. I don't think there's a good one other than, hey, Michigan's 18-5 and Missouri's 17-6. So I'm going to put the 18-5 team in front of the team that's 17-6. I think that's all the real evidence that you needed for why Michigan is now ranked ahead of Mizzou. But again, what matters is where you're ranked, where you're seated in the NCAA tournament. And Missouri has every opportunity over the next 3 weeks to be able to put together 6 out of 7-ish, which would get them into that probably top 15 in the country. And that's where you want to be as a team going into the NCAA tournament. All right, in 15 minutes, we're going to play a game of Can You Beat the Blues? We're going to have an opportunity for you to score a pair of tickets to an upcoming Blues game and a signed hockey puck by Oscar Sundqvist. You will be competing against Sonny in Can You Beat the Blues? That's coming up at 1:30. So text in, and then the next segment, I'll tell you when to do so, and we'll give you an opportunity to go up against the Blues. But next, NFL Quick Hitters with some of the ancillary parts of last night's game. The halftime show. We got to talk about Tom Brady's analysis and that watch that was $700,000 that he was wearing in that game.
Looked nice.
Yeah, pretty nice. And we also have to talk a little bit about that score bug. What the hell were you doing, Fox? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN. Beat the Blues if you would like to go up against Oscar Sundqvist in today's game. All right, T-Bone, let's dive into some NFL quick hitters. Want to go over some of the ancillary pieces to yesterday's Super Bowl matchup between the Chiefs and the Eagles. We've discussed the game in every possible way at this point. Let's start out with this. What'd you think of the Super Bowl score bug? Fox debuted a new score bug last night. For those that aren't familiar, that's the little score at the very bottom. This one looked like it was something that I would make on Canva. It had no background. The letters were really, really large. I did kind of like not having the background. It made me feel like I could see more of the game on the screen. I don't know if that was my mind playing games with me or not. I thought it was too big. It just looked way oversized for what you typically would expect. I like a simple score bug, but I like it to be a little smaller on the screen. I just want to see the game. What did you think of it last night, T-Bone?
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of it because I agreed. I thought it was too big, but I also don't like the kind of see-through with the score. To me, it just felt like I was looking at a broken score bug the whole game. And it got under my skin a little bit where I'm sitting there going, can they fix this, please? Even though I knew it wasn't broken. So I wasn't a fan of it. I liked the one they had previously, which kind of had the team logo in it, and it was a little bit smaller, and it was filled in, most importantly. I was not a fan of the new score bug.
I just want it to be a little smaller. I think they're on their way to something that over time we'll get used to. It was just way too big last night. The debut version of it was a little too large. All right, next thing up, Tom Brady. He was a big storyline going into last night's game. He's making $35 million a year from Fox to be a broadcaster for them. The last time Fox had the Super Bowl, it was Greg Olsen, and he was fantastic.
Yeah.
He was absolutely excellent in that game. I thought Brady was fine. The game gave him nothing, so that's part of it. But early on, I wanted a little bit more. I wanted Brady to take us back to like 2007. Patriots have this unbelievable offense. They're going up against a C. Spagnuolo defense, and the pressure, the front four, is what got to him. And he just didn't really add a whole lot. There was a couple of plays where, especially that play that you referenced earlier, the missed throw to DeAndre Hopkins, Brady broke it down and said, hey, you can see with his feet. He's getting the happy feet right now because he's feeling that pressure even when it's not there. So there were moments I felt like for him, and he had the quip later on in the game where they talked about all of the celebrities that were out there and Kevin Hart, and he was like, how can the cameras even find Kevin Hart? It's like, okay, at least Brady's showing a little bit of personality here.
And it felt kind of...
It was forced.
Yeah. It was like, the game's a blowout. Let me take a shot at Kevin Hart.
I thought it might have been his best game that I've heard him this season, and that just didn't really say a whole lot. I just want more from Brady. He was on with Colin Cowherd last week. He was awesome. Like, legitimately excellent with Cowherd, and he's had that multiple times this season. I just want the producers to sit down with him and be like, hey, man, people just want to sit down and have a beer and watch the game with Tom Brady. Stop being so buttoned up. It feels like he's, overproduced in these games. There's a good version of Tom Brady in there somewhere for these games. It just hasn't come out yet.
Yeah, I agree. I thought he was just okay. I didn't think he really provided a whole lot to the broadcast. I felt like he still wanted more, especially early on when Mahomes was going through it. And it's, hey, why tell us if I'm Tom Brady right now and I'm on that bench where Patrick Mahomes is sitting, what's the conversation I'm having with Andy Reid right now? How are we going to beat this Eagles defensive line that's sitting in my lap for this entire first half for the most part?
Yep.
And he never really got that. He just kind of wanted to go with the flow of the game, followed along, which is okay. But I agree. I think you want more from Tom Brady. And I don't know how you get there. I felt like the Super Bowl commercial, I don't know if you saw it, the one with the batteries and that they had Tom Brady. He felt robotic. And it felt, when I saw that commercial, I couldn't help but think, I feel like that's the Brady I'm getting, just a robot that's kind of going through the motions.
All right, so next thing up here, the introductions.
Yeah, what's wrong? You're not John. Why not John Hamm?
Why?
I didn't know he was a Chiefs fan.
I didn't either. That's the thing. I don't think most of St. Louis knew that John Hamm was a Kansas City Chiefs fan. So apparently he claims all the LA teams. He obviously claims the St. Louis Blues. We've seen that.
No, I've seen him at Kings games.
Sure. But he also claims the Chiefs now? Paul Rudd was there. He was at the game. They showed him pregame.
And he's a known Chiefs fan.
He's from Kansas City, is at a bunch of games. I've seen him in the locker room many a time when I was covering the team in KC. I don't understand why that was the choice. It just felt so weird and forced. I know Paul Rudd is not known for his intimidating voice or anything. Neither is Bradley Cooper, who introduced the Philadelphia Eagles, but at least he's a huge Philly fan. Yeah. He's attached to the team and stuff. It was a really odd choice. I felt like Fox did everything right pregame. They had such a great pregame, whether it was on Bourbon Street or what they were doing with Brady beforehand. All of it I thought went really smooth. The anthem was great. All of that stuff was awesome. And then John Hamm goes out there to introduce the Kansas City Chiefs, and I was like, this doesn't make... It'd be like Paul Rudd introducing the St. Louis Blues. What? Why? That doesn't make sense. Get somebody from St. Louis to do this. It's weird.
Yeah, I was surprised when I saw John Hamm was in, because I thought I first saw the Bradley Cooper one, Philadelphia Eagles, he's doing them, and I was like, okay, that makes sense. I've seen Bradley Cooper wear Eagles gear before, right? And I know he's a huge Eagles fan. So my first thought was, okay, so who are they going to do for the Chiefs? And I immediately thought Paul Rudd. That was the first name that came to my mind. And then when I saw the tweet that it was John Hamm, my reaction was, seriously, I didn't know he was a Chiefs fan. I've never seen him wear Chiefs gear. I don't know if I've ever seen him at a Chiefs game.
I haven't. I'm not kidding. I've literally never seen him.
Yeah, okay, fine. I guess we're going with John Hamm. Paul Rudd would have been my first choice. But, yeah, I agree with you. I thought it was kind of weird and forced that they wanted to do it with John Hamm. But it is what it is, I guess.
The text line said, John Hamm was a great choice if they're a team that's rooting or trying to recruit fans from St. Louis. I don't know if that's the way to do it, though.
Yeah, and why would you choose of all if you wanted to do that, when you do a regular season game for that?
I don't know. You don't really announce guys. Whatever. It was a weird choice in my opinion. All right, next thing up here as we go through some of the ancillary pieces of this year's Super Bowl. We'll get to Can You Beat the Blues on the other side. What'd you think of the halftime show, T-Bone? Because I think we might have a little differing thoughts on the Kendrick Lamar performance.
Yeah, I know it's not my cup of tea, so I know I'm already at a disadvantage when it comes to the halftime show. I just thought it was fine. I thought there was nothing memorable from it, and I understand that I'm missing on the whole him fighting with Drake thing and the song and all that. That's fine. I just feel like in 10 years, I personally, and I feel like maybe there's going to be a lot of people that feel this way, but I'm willing to admit I'm wrong, unlike how Grok thinks I feel, the AI from Twitter. I think it's not going to be remembered in 10 years. That's how I feel about that halftime performance.
And I disagree. I think this is one where, like, if you're somebody that is interested in hip hop, the biggest story in hip hop last year, and really one of the biggest stories in music or pop culture, was the Drake versus Kendrick Lamar beef, right? And that came to a head with Kendrick Lamar's hit song. Kendrick Lamar ends up having this huge night at the Grammys, mostly because of that song. And then he's going out there, and a guy that is very active politically in a landscape that doesn't necessarily align with Kendrick Lamar, given where we're at right now. And he made, if you like read into it, a bunch of political statements inside of his show last night. For that halftime performance, like, I thought it was pretty amazing. When I first started watching it, my thought process was just like, entertain me, right? Give me what we saw with Bruno Mars. Give me what we saw with Beyonce. Like those kinds of true shows that are put out there. It's not a show for me specifically. I respect Kendrick's talents. I'm just not a huge fan of the music. It just doesn't do stuff for me, and that's okay. Not every piece of music is for everybody. But his show last night, like when you see people that are way smarter than me that break it down, pretty amazing, honestly. So I think it will actually over time be more and more appreciated, as opposed to some of them where it's like, okay, came and went. It was a little entertaining. Like Rihanna. I thought Rihanna was really good, but it was just like it came and went. It was entertaining.
Kind of forget about it.
The 2000s hip hop stuff that they did, where they just have a bunch of different dudes that are going out there in kind of an ensemble. Came and went. It was a good performance. Don't know how much necessarily was like truly memorable about it. Last night, I think, actually has a little bit of staying power, and I do think it is one that over time will be remembered even more fondly than necessarily it was in the actual moment. So that was a pretty impressive performance last night.
If we're still working together or talking in 10 years, please remind me of the Super Bowl performance, because I'm going to forget about it. And when you bring it up, just say, hey, it was the Super Bowl where Mahomes got his ass handed to him. And I'll go, oh, yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, then you'll remember. Me too, buddy. He's Tanner Hendrickson. That is Grant Francis, and I'm Brandon Kiley. In 15 minutes, we'll hit the BK and Ferrario Rewind. But coming up next, we're going to play a game of Can You Beat the Blues? The contestant today is Oscar Sundquist. We do have our contestants. We'll have 3 of them going up against Oscar Sundquist today. The grand prize winner will get a pair of tickets to see the Blues play and a hockey puck signed by Oscar Sundquist. We'll do that next year on BK and Ferrario.
Grant Francis here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Big game last night. The Eagles emerged victorious 40-22 in Super Bowl 59 over the Kansas City Chiefs, preventing the Chiefs from making history and three-peating. A big part of that was Jalen Hurts. He took home the MVP last night, went 17 for 22, had 221 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, also had a rushing touchdown and added 72 yards on the ground. And for the Blues over the weekend, they played the Chicago Blackhawks. They beat them 6-5 in a 10-round shootout, putting them at 55 points on the season, 8 points out of the playoff picture going into the Four Nations break. I'm Grant Francis. The Sports Center update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
All right, it is time for our weekly segment here on BK and Ferrario. It is called Can You Beat the Blues? We do this each and every Monday on the show. So if you'd like an opportunity to win a pair of tickets to see the St. Louis Blues and a signed hockey puck, be sure to stay tuned here on BK and Ferrario and tune in every Monday. We have 3 contestants today. It's going to be Greg, Eddie, Zach. They will be going up against Oscar Sundquist. The winner today will get a signed hockey puck by Oscar Sundquist and tickets to see the Blues versus the Winnipeg Jets. That is coming up on February the 22nd. The game is very simple. We're going to give you 15 seconds to name as many different things within a specific category as you can. So if I said colors, T-Bone would say
red, blue, yellow, green, purple, pink.
All right, T-Bone didn't do very well, but that would be the way that this thing goes. You'll have a bet underneath you. When that bet ends, we'll say, we'll count up how many you were able to get within that category. If you got 8 and then Oscar Sundquist got 7, you get a +1. Whoever has the best plus minus at the end of this game will end up getting the victory. Like I said, we got Greg, Eddie, and Zach going up against Oscar Sundquist today. Let's start out with Greg. Greg, we appreciate you tuning in, being a part of the show. How you doing today, my friend?
Just fine, thank you.
Absolutely. Do you understand the rules of the game, Greg?
Yes.
All right, Greg, you're going up against Oscar Sundquist, and his first category is going to be brands of potato chips. Name as many different brands of potato chips as you can in 15 seconds. On your mark, get set, go.
Lay's, Pringles, Crunchers. Oh, man. Munchies. Frito-Lays. I already said that.
Greg, going with Crunchers as your third choice was a bit of an upset.
What is Crunchers? I don't know what that is.
I've never heard of it.
I'm not familiar with them. Greg, can you explain Crunchers to us?
We got to fact check you here.
Well, they're what are they? I mean,
kettle cooks.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
You know, and yeah.
Oh, okay. I got your point. That is a poll.
All right, so I had Greg for 4. Is that what you guys had as well?
Yeah.
All right, Greg, we'll see if Oscar Sundquist knows his potato chips. Here we go.
Lay's, Tostitos, God, we studied too. Pringles, Ruffles, what's the goat head thingy?
He also got a 4.
Here's a question, though. He said Tostitos. Those are tortilla chips, not potato chips.
Yeah, okay. What are you? Wait, I guess
It's
somebody
a fair
had to play
question.
the role of
It's a
Alex,
fair
didn't
question.
they? Oh, boy.
I'm going to give it to him. I'd say it's a 4 on each side.
Yeah.
That's an even matchup between Greg and Oscar Sundquist. We'll see if that's able to hold up over time. All right, Greg, good work, my friend. Let's go to Eddie. Eddie, you're going up against Oscar Sundquist today in a game that we like to call Can You Beat the Blues? How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good.
All right, Greg, or excuse me, Eddie, do you feel like you're going to be able to take down Oscar Sundquist today in a way that Greg could not?
Man, I don't want to take down Oscar. I got to stick up for him every time. My wife doesn't like him, but I love Oscar.
What do you mean your wife doesn't like Oscar
Sonny?
Sundquist? Who doesn't like Oscar Sundquist?
Yeah.
My wife just like, he's in the box all the time. I can't stand him. I'm like,
That's fair.
leave him alone. He's playing
okay.
hard.
I will say
Great
she
guy,
does
though.
have a fair complaint, but yeah, I agree. Leave him alone. He's one of my favorites.
All right,
I
Eddie.
agree.
Eddie, you're going up against Oscar Sundquist. And your category today, you're going to have 15 seconds to name as many different things in it as you can. Coffee drinks that you could buy at a coffee shop. Drinks that you could buy at a coffee shop. All right? Name as many as you can in 15 seconds. On your mark, get set, go.
Espresso, latte, cold brew, heavy cream, black, extra sugar.
All right. I'll give you the black coffee. That one definitely counts. I'm not going to give you the extra sugar. How do we feel about heavy cream? I don't know.
Is it like an add-on in coffee? Not really a buy.
I don't feel like that necessarily is in the spirit of the rules here.
If I went to Starbucks and ordered...
She runs Einstein Bagels. She serves coffee all day.
I guess you could go and ask for heavy cream.
Yeah, but you're not paying for it.
Yeah. I think I'd give them 4.
They wouldn't give it to you for free.
Yeah.
How do you feel about this one? Would you give it to him or no? It's a 4 without, it's a 5 with. I feel like that is not something that you would be able to get.
I'm with you. I'd give them 4.
No, I'm overruled either
right,
way. So
4 it is. Eddie, we're going to give you 4 on this one, and we'll see how Oscar Sundquist does in it. All right, Sonny is a big coffee drinker, as we know. How can you do with other things that you would buy at a coffee shop? Let's take a listen.
Pumpkin spice latte, Americano, just regular black coffee, coffee with cream, coffee with milk, coffee latte, cappuccino, espresso.
All right, so however we want to categorize that, he got a win by a significant margin. I had him with 8. Even if you didn't include any of the coffees, he's still going to get the win, which means, unfortunately, Eddie, you could not beat the Blues today.
Thanks.
Eddie, it was a good effort. You said you didn't want to beat Oscar Sundquist, and guess what? You didn't. All right, let's go out to hear from Zach. Zach, you're a third contestant today. You have to be able to beat Oscar Sundquist head-to-head in order to get the signed hockey puck and tickets to see the Blues versus the Winnipeg Jets coming up on February 22nd. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're thrilled to have you. Do you understand the rules of the game?
Yeah.
All right, Zach. Your category today is going to be types of food cuisine, different cultures, types of food cuisine. You're going to have 15 seconds to name as many as you can. On your mark, get set, go.
Italian, classic American, diners, Mexican, Korean, Japanese, Thai, Indian.
He was off to a pretty good start
I was
there.
going to say, I was pretty impressed there.
That was a pretty good start there for Zach. I think he might be able to take this one down. We'll see how Oscar Sundquist does on his types of food.
Italian, Korean, Thai, Indian, European, American, Mexican, Ecuadorian.
That's a bowl.
All right. So I had him with 8. Did you guys have him with 8 as well?
I had him with 8.
yeah, I did too.
Here's the question. And this will ultimately determine the game. Does European count?
I was thinking the same thing.
There is no, like, European style of food.
It's all different.
Ryder, how are you feeling about this one? Does European count as a type of cuisine?
No.
I think I'm with you.
Yeah.
Do you guys agree?
I would agree.
Because he also then went to, like, Italian, which is a European country.
Right.
I feel like you can't get both of those.
I wouldn't give him European.
I wouldn't either.
In that scenario, we've got Zach as our winner today, who's going home with a signed hockey puck by Oscar Sundquist and tickets to see the Blues versus the Winnipeg Jets on February 22nd. Congratulations, Zach. The question was, can you beat the Blues? And you did indeed beat the St. Louis Blues.
Well, thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Zach, stay on the line. We'll get your information. We'll get you all signed up. So that way you've got that signed hockey puck by Oscar Sundquist and tickets to see the Blues versus the Winnipeg Jets coming up on February 22nd. We play this game each and every Monday here on BK and Ferrario. You'll go up against a different Blue. You'll have opportunities to win signed hockey pucks and get a pair of tickets to see the St. Louis Blues in a future game. So be sure to tune in on Monday mornings. Coming up next, we're going to hit the BK and Ferrario Rewind and put a bow on this thing here on 101 ESPN. Hey, help heat up St. Louis this Friday morning during the 25th annual Hardee's Rise and Shine fundraiser. Stop by any participating Hardee's in the bi-state area on Friday morning and grab a sausage biscuit or an egg biscuit for just $1. 100% of the proceeds for all funds collected will help heat up St. Louis, supporting people in need in both Missouri and Illinois. That's Friday morning at any participating Hardee's. You can find out more information at 101ESPN.com. All right, guys, to put a bow on this thing today, let's finish out by talking about the biggest story, of course, in the sports world, and that is the Philadelphia Eagles absolutely destroying the Kansas City Chiefs last night in the Super Bowl. I didn't see it coming. I was dead wrong in this game. You guys heard my commentary all last week. I thought it was going to be a close game, which couldn't have been more wrong, and I thought the Chiefs were going to win, and that also couldn't have been more wrong. My opinion on this game was that I thought people were overstating the talent discrepancy between the Chiefs and the Eagles. You don't go 15-1 in the regular season and 17-1 overall when you don't have a lot of talent beyond just the quarterback position. So the Chiefs, I thought, were a really good football team. And the Eagles made them look terrible yesterday. The way that the Buccaneers did back in that Super Bowl as well. It was basically a carbon copy of the script. The defensive line was unstoppable. The corners were super physical with the Chiefs wide receivers. Mahomes had nowhere to go with the football. He held on to it too long, and then boom, he's getting sacked in the pocket. And when he finally started to move around a little bit more, he got antsy and was throwing into tight windows that you don't see from him very often. So the Eagles deserve all the credit in the world. I didn't feel like this was a game where the Chiefs peed down their leg necessarily. I thought the Eagles just dominated from start to finish of that game in a way that we very rarely see in a Super Bowl nowadays. Biggest comparisons that I can go to in recent memory were the Seahawks against the Denver Broncos, the Bucks going up against the Raiders, and the Ravens going up against the Giants. In the last 25 years, those are the only three comparisons that I can think of that were similar to what we witnessed yesterday with the Kansas City Chiefs losing to the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, I don't think it was a thing about the Chiefs, peeing down their leg. I think it was, hey, tip your cap to the Philadelphia Eagles, man. Like, we slept on that defense a little bit, and we knew the defense was good going into that Super Bowl, but they were a different kind of dominant, just continuously getting pressure in the face of Patrick Mahomes and doing so without blitzing, which is the most impressive thing about that, because we talked about it. That should be an advantage for the Chiefs. 5-on-4, 6-on-4 if you got the running back in the pocket to help out. And they just made him uncomfortable to where he had no time, never found a rhythm offensively, and they put the game away. 40-22 is closer than what that game really was. That game was really 40-7, essentially. That's how bad of a beatdown that game really was.
I went into the game thinking that the Chiefs had, I think this was most people's assessment, a pretty sizable advantage at coach and quarterback. And not just coach, but coaching. I would say that extends to like the coordinators as well. And that just wasn't the case, man. Jalen Hurts outplayed Patrick Mahomes. Now, there's context to that. Mahomes was under duress all day long. But that's part of the story, right? That's part of playing the position, is dealing with whatever your outside factors are. Jalen Hurts was great yesterday. Didn't throw a ton, but when he did, averaged more than 10 yards per attempt. And Patrick Mahomes was really bad. Even when he did have a little bit of time, threw a couple of picks, including a pick six. Like, hey, man, that's part of your story. And yesterday, he got outplayed by Jalen Hurts. And I thought coaching-wise, the Eagles outcoached the Kansas City Chiefs. Andy Reid got outcoached on the defensive side of the ball by Vic Fangio. Yeah. And Steve Spagnuolo got outcoached by Nick Sirianni. Never in a million years did I think that was going to happen. But he did. I think the Chiefs tried their best, and they accomplished their goal of shutting down Saquon Barkley. That was their stated goal going in, and they filled up the box in order to do so. Mission accomplished. What they didn't see coming was that Jalen Hurts would be able to throw over the top of their defense with the amount of success that he had yesterday. That dude deserves all the credit in the world. What a story, man. From being benched at halftime of his national championship game with Alabama to being a top 3 candidate for the MVP a couple of years ago and now winning the Super Bowl MVP. One hell of a story for Jalen Hurts. Can't be more impressed by the performance of him yesterday.
Yeah, and now we talked about it. Top 10 quarterback, no questions asked, right? Like, you can't make an argument like I did going into the Super Bowl saying, hey, he's like a top 15, maybe 15 to 20 range. No questions asked now, man. He's outdueled Patrick Mahomes twice in the Super Bowl. And I know he lost the one 2 years ago. He had an argument to be Super Bowl MVP in that loss because he was just better. And look, I questioned my whole thought going into that Super Bowl was, hey, if they stop Barkley like they did, 25 carries, 57 yards, can Jalen Hurts outduel Patrick Mahomes? And he did. And he did it flawlessly. 221 yards. That's not impressive in terms of the amount of yardage thrown, but he was efficient. 17 to 22. And then I think the most impressive part was not only efficient through the air, but when he had opportunities to run the football, we saw him drop back, pocket kind of collapses around him, or Chiefs don't keep their contain, I should say, and he'd take off the middle and go gain 10 yards and get them first down. So, I mean, he rushed for 72 yards combined for 300 total.
It's amazing.
It was impressive. My hat's off to Hurts because he was really good in that Super Bowl. Top 10 quarterback. I'm going to give him his flowers today.
The next storyline, and we'll be talking about this probably tomorrow on the show, is what comes next for these teams. The Eagles have now been to 2 Super Bowls and won 1 in a 3-year stretch. That's rare. And now they look like a team that's pretty well set up for an extended run here, given what the NFC is. And the only other quarterback in the conference right now that has won a Super Bowl is Matt Stafford. And we're not entirely sure that he's coming back next year. I think he will, but it's not 100% yet. And the Rams are going through some overhaul this offseason as well. So the Eagles are well situated to be able to go on a bit of a run. We'll talk about that as we continue. And the Chiefs on the other side of things, when they end up losing in the postseason, generally, they go through a massive offseason change. 2018, they lose to the Patriots. Defense was horrific in that game. They fire their DC and end up completely overhauling the defensive side of the ball. 2020, Bucs Super Bowl. Offensive line was terrible. They invest everything into the offensive line. 2021, lose to the Bengals in the AFC Championship game. They trade Tyreek Hill and go with a full youth movement for their roster. They're going to have some kind of a pivot coming off of the Super Bowl, and we'll talk about that as we continue along here this week on BK and Ferrario. We'll also be talking about the Cardinals as TMA is broadcasting live from Cardinal Spring Training down in Jupiter, Florida. Don't miss TMA Live from Roger Dean all week long. It's all presented by CarStar, your auto body repair experts, and by Sumner One, print and business technology solutions that keep your workplace humming. If you guys missed anything from the show today, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Schaefer Door Company.
You can always check us out on the 101 ESPN app, whether you're listening live or getting those podcasts after the fact. It is free to download. It is super easy to use, and that is presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. We'll talk to Jeremy Rutherford tomorrow ahead of the Four Nations face-off, get his thoughts on some of the Blues that are going to be participating in that, and get his thoughts on some of the potential moves that this team could make as we approach the trade deadline. For Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. The Fast Lane is coming up next here on 101 ESPN.